Chapter 184. Several hundred people were shouting at the entrance of the immortal abode. This scene had long since attracted the attention of many commoners. It was as if they were looking at animals in a zoo. Every one of them had expressions of schadenfreude on their faces. To the commoners, both the embroidered uniform guard and the immortal abode were representatives of privilege. They were both lofty existences. To be able to see them fighting amongst themselves was like a dog-eat-dog situation. The commoners were happy to see it happen. More and more commoners gathered to watch. Gradually, even the servants and spies of the ministers began to appear in the crowd. They all wanted to figure out what was going on. Just as more and more people gathered to watch the commotion, LV Gue walked out of the immortal abode's entrance. When he saw so many commoners gathered around, his heart tightened. The loyal Marquis had been right. Things had already gotten to this point. If they were to take away such a large sum of gold and silver, it was easy to imagine what kind of impact that would have. If it weren't for Yang Qindong's warning, he would have made a grave mistake. He might even lose his head. And all of this was because he had trusted his subordinate Han Ji's words. He'd said he was giving Yang Qindong a show of strength, but in reality, wasn't he also putting his own head on the line? Everyone had this kind of mentality. When something happened, they were always willing to push the blame onto others. It was as if this was the only way to make them seem more intelligent. LV Gue had pushed all the blame onto Han Ji. When he saw how Han Ji was still jumping around, as if he wasn't afraid of making a big fuss, LV Gue couldn't help but feel angry. He quickly stepped forward and slapped Han Ji's face. Pa! A loud slap fell, causing the originally bustling street to quiet down. Bastard, who told you that Wallace spies had infiltrated the immortal abode? This official went in to investigate, but there was nothing. As the head of the embroidered uniform guard, you actually believed a subordinate's report so easily. You didn't even investigate properly before taking action. Even this official was used by you. This is truly infuriating. From today onwards, Han Ji will be demoted to Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard. Not only was Lu Gue slapped, but he was also scolded. Even Lu Gue's rank was demoted by more than one rank. Only then did Lu Gue feel much better. He looked around with a sinister gaze and said to the commoners who were watching the show, "What's there to see? Disperse." The dignified commander of the embroidered uniform guard had spoken. Who would dare to stay here? Everyone immediately scattered in all directions, restoring peace and tranquility. LV Gue immediately left with his people. Han Ji, who was stunned by the two slaps, was also dragged away by several of his trusted subordinates. By the window of a private room on the second floor of the immortal abode, Yang Qindong had seen everything that had happened. His gaze was as sharp as a sword. "Young master, now that Han Ji has been demoted, I'm afraid that his hatred for you will grow even greater. In order to avoid any future troubles, why don't?" Tiger Mane, who was standing behind him, sensed the faint killing intent coming from Yang Qindong's body and took a small step forward. Yang Qindong didn't refuse. He simply nodded. Tiger Mane immediately understood. He also looked down at Han Ji's departing figure. This person is dead for sure. Yang Qindong had taken over all the military forces and defenses in the capital. The first thing he did was open the city gates, allowing the commoners who wanted to leave to leave. The already panicked merchants and commoners now had a chance to leave. In a flash, the population of the capital plummeted, and many industries were emptied. Using this chance, Yang Qindong decisively made his move. With Yang Qindong, Hu Yin, Xiaoyin, Madame Snow, and Madame Xiang working together, more and more industries and properties fell under Yang Qindong's control. In the immortal abode, the deputy chief of the Bureau of Security and the actual leader of Yang Xie's intelligence department, Yang San, was currently reporting all the information he had gathered to Yang Qindong. "Young master, everything is as you imagined. The city gates are open, but the majority of those leaving are still merchants. The commoners only make up 2 or 3 out of 10. It seems that the commoners still have confidence in the imperial court. In addition, according to your previous orders, we've investigated and found that there truly are some merchants in the city who are profiting from the country's calamity. These people are mainly grain and salt merchants. They are wantonly raising the prices of grain and salt, throwing the normal order of the capital into disarray. We've recorded all the names of these people. It's all on this list. As Yang San spoke, he respectfully handed a list of names to his superior, Tiger's Mane, and then transferred it to Yang Chendong. Casually glancing at the list, he saw that there were 50 to 60 names. Yang Chendong lightly shook his head. These merchants have no sovereign or country and only have profit in their eyes. They should be arrested. How about this? Immediately report this to eunuch Jin Ing and have him report this to His Majesty. After that, mobilize the embroidered uniform guard and the Eastern Depot to arrest these merchants for the crime of colluding with the enemy. Yang Chendong's voice was firm and decisive. There was nothing wrong with merchants seeking wealth, but if they wanted to profit from war and the country's calamity, then sorry, these merchants needed to be properly punished. Presumably, arresting these people would serve as a warning to the enemy. With this sort of example, the other merchants would have to think twice before doing anything out of line. As for how these merchants would be dealt with after being arrested, the embroidered uniform guard would probably know what to do. At most, they would be using money to buy their lives. As for those merchants who only cared about wealth and not the country, sorry, but killing a few of them as an example wasn't out of the question. After dealing with these merchants, Yang San continued to report. Young Master, Commander Long Song has brought 3 companies of Long Feng to the outskirts of the capital. They only need your order to enter the city. He's asking for Young Master's instructions on when and how to enter the city. In Yang Xie's new army, there were currently 20 companies and 5 battalions in the army and 20 companies and 5 battalions in the navy. However, Yang Chendong didn't integrate these armies, and they were still divided into battalions. But even so, 2 commanders were appointed, and they were Long Song of the army and Gao Xiong of the navy. This time, after learning that the young master was going to fight with Tile in the capital, they had to properly deal with the other party's spirit. In Crimson City, the battalion commanders of the Yang faction's new army were all busy fighting for this opportunity to perform well in front of the 6th young master. With the various battalion commanders fighting over this opportunity, Gao Xiong and Long Song couldn't come to a decision. In the end, Long Song, as the commander, brought 3 companies of soldiers over. After all, this battle was under the command of the 6th young master, and to be able to learn from the 6th young master was Long Song's wish. As the only commander of the army and the highest-ranking officer other than Yang Chendong, if he were to personally lead the soldiers, the other battalion commanders naturally lost their chance. Since they couldn't become the commander, the other battalion commanders set their sights on the position of company commander. For a moment, the battalion commanders were willing to lower themselves by a rank and come to the capital as company commanders, listening to the orders of the 6th young master. For this matter, Long Song and Gao Xiong had a headache for a long time. In the end, after some coordination, they came up with a result that satisfied all parties. Long Song would be the commander of the 1st Battalion and the commander of the 2nd Company. Tung Shan, who was originally the commander of the 3rd Battalion, would be the commander of the 3rd Company. The commander of the 4th Battalion, Wu Shang, would be the commander of the 4th Company. If one added on the 2nd Battalion commander, Xiao Feng, who had arrived in the capital early, then there would be 1 commander and 3 battalion commanders, forming 4 elite companies. At this time, Yang Chendong was holding a list in his hands. On it was a detailed list of the 300 men of the 3 companies. There were many names on this list that he could name. These were the first batch of cold front soldiers that he had personally trained, and 4th Battalion Commander Wu Sheng had also been trained by him. But when he graduated, there were too few officer positions, so he had been assigned the position of squad leader. He hadn't expected that after the training and outstanding performance in Crimson City, he would be promoted to battalion commander so quickly. Okay, arrange for them to enter the city in the afternoon. That's right, have them all wear camouflage uniforms and enter the city. Since they're called mercenaries, they naturally have to be different from other soldiers. Yang San will be in charge of this matter. Tiger's man will arrange for people to find a large courtyard in the city and have Long Song and the others settle down there. Remember, without the permission of the young master, no one is allowed to approach that place. If any embroidered uniform guard or Eastern faction guard spies want to understand the situation, see some blood, but it's best if they don't kill anyone. The cold front had been single-handedly established by Yang Chendong, and he had spent a great deal of effort on it. Now that he finally had a chance to shine his sword, he naturally couldn't be careless. As the orders were passed down, the capital began to bustle with activity. Many embroidered uniform guards wearing flying fish robes suddenly appeared outside the shops that were operating. Upon their appearance, they immediately took away the shopkeepers and sealed up the shops. Their appearance was so sudden that many of the shopkeepers had cold chains around their necks before they could even understand what was going on. For a moment, one could see embroidered uniform guards on the streets, as well as the fat shopkeepers in cotton robes who had been captured by them. The sealing of shops and the capture of shopkeepers had caused wave after wave of unrest. This was especially the case since the majority of the shops that had been sealed were those that sold rice and salt. These were the most basic necessities of the common people, and this made them even more anxious. Chaos could erupt at any moment. Right at this moment, the sound of firecrackers could be heard from the streets. When the curious citizens came over, they realized that some new grain shops and salt shops had opened for business. The excellent location, the spacious and bright business environment, and the sight of mountains of rice and grains, as well as the unified Yang signboard, instantly calmed the anxious hearts of the citizens. Chapter 185. This was especially so when they heard that the prices of rice and salt were still the same as 10 days ago. There was no sign that the prices would increase because of the impending war. This made the common folk beam with joy and rush forward to buy. This also played a very positive role in stabilizing the morale of the people in the capital. Near the Miaoying Temple, also known as the White Tower Temple, in the inner city, in a shop that occupied an area of 500 square meters, a girl dressed in a pink suit was smiling as she looked at the people coming and going in the shop. She watched as the customers came and left happily. This woman was Yang Qindong's wife, Hu Yin. Dressed in a pink suit, she looked extremely capable and experienced. At this moment, she was supervising everything that happened in the shop as the lady boss, as well as all the transactions. The Miaoying Temple was near the Hu estate. Hu Yin had chosen this place to exercise her sovereignty so that she could better see the smiles on the faces of her former neighbors. Reality did not disappoint her. The cheap and high-quality food indeed made the faces of the commoners who entered here brimming with satisfied smiles. First, madam, Marquis has ordered for you to hurry to the Yongding Gate. There's a show to watch. Just as she was sitting on a chair, sipping tea and looking at everything in front of her with satisfaction, Sun Chuang came to Hu Yan's side and reported in a low voice after exchanging a few words with Long Feng, who was delivering the news. There's a show to watch? Prepare the sedan. Hu Yin originally wanted to stay a little longer and see if she could meet some acquaintances. However, when she heard that there was going to be a show to watch, how could she calm down? She immediately got up in a hurry, causing her maidservant, Xiao Qing, to grumble, "Miss, slow down. Walk slower." The same scene happened to Qiao Yin, Madame Shui, and Madame Xiang, who were patrolling the various shops in the city. They had all received news that there was a show to watch at the Yongding Gate, and that their husband was waiting for them there. Thus, they all came in their sedan. On the tower of the Yongding Gate, Yang Qindong, dressed in green, was standing there. Beside him were Tao Jin, Sun Chuang, and the other commanders of the warden's office. The five of them stood there and looked into the distance. Unfortunately, their eyesight was limited, and what they could see was very limited. Seeing nothing, the five of them looked at each other and then shook their heads. They really didn't know why the loyal Marquis had called them here. Compared to what the five of them were looking at with their eyes, Yang Qindong was holding a pair of military binoculars in his hand. From time to time, he would raise the binoculars and look into the distance. Then, a faint smile would appear in his eyes. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of high heels stepping on the ground could be heard from the stairs leading to the city tower. It was crisp and pleasant to the ears. Hearing the voice, Yang Qindong didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Apart from his four wives, there was no one else in the world who would wear something as avant-garde as high-heeled leather shoes. Sure enough, Hu Yin took the lead, followed by Qiao Yin, followed by Madame Shui and Madame Xiang. The four women wore different women's suits of different colors and arrived at the top of the tower of the Yongding Gate. As soon as the four women appeared, it was really like 100 flowers blooming, giving a great visual impact to the men. The delicate women's suits made the four women's originally plump figures look more explosive. Under the knee-length miniskirts were white skin and slender and healthy legs, which made the men's hearts beat faster. With the contrast of the high heels, it made their figures look even more tall and beautiful. As soon as the four women appeared, they attracted everyone's attention. Ahem. Tiger's mane, who was standing aside, noticed that Sun Pe and the other four people's eyes were fixed on Hu Yin and the other three women. He immediately coughed a few times. These coughs also reminded Sun Pe and the other four people and instantly pulled their thoughts back to reality. Only then did they realize that it was really indecent to stare at the wives of the loyal marquis with such eyes. Immediately, they blushed and turned their heads away. Lu Lang, Hu Yin and the other women simply ignored the gazes of others looking at them. Although their hearts were beating very fast at this time, they had gradually become accustomed to the feeling of being stared at and were able to quickly calm their emotions. The four women happily came to Yang Chendong and surrounded him, and then greeted him. Of course, the most common question of the women was to ask what was there to see here. Don't worry, they will be here soon. Come on, give each of the four wives a telescope. Yang Chendong looked at the four women and smiled. With a gentle wave of his hand, Tiger's mane and Beta Persei each held 2 binoculars and handed them to Hu Yin and the other 3 women. The 4 women were no stranger to binoculars. They had seen it when they were in Yang Village. They had also sighed at the magic of this thing and their husband's cleverness. At this time, after taking the binoculars in their hands, they looked in the direction Yang Chendong pointed. With this look, a touch of olive green appeared in the binoculars. From a distance, it looked like a straight pine tree. The only difference was that this pine tree was moving forward slowly. What is that? How can it move? Madame Snow was like a child who had discovered a new world. She shouted and shouted, expressing her curiosity. Although Hu Yin and Lady Xiang did not say anything, they put down the binoculars and looked at Yang Chendong with expectant eyes, revealing the surprise in their hearts. Only Qiao Yin, who had been to Qian City and even witnessed Yang Chendong training Long Feng, looked at the 6th young master with a kind of gentle sunshine. She knew very well that these moving pine trees must be the trained elite force, Long Feng, and their appearance must have been ordered by Lu Lang. What is it? What can move? At this time, Sun Tong and the other 4 looked at the girls with puzzled and confused eyes, and finally fixed their eyes on Yang Chendong. Seeing everyone's confusion, Yang Chendong first took off the binoculars hanging on his body and then handed it to Tiger's mane, who was standing beside him. He did not say anything, but this servant who had been following him since childhood understood the young master's meaning. He took the binoculars and handed it to the puzzled Sun Tong. With curiosity and even more confusion, Sun Tong took the nightmare domain and then followed Yang Chendong and the girls, put the binoculars in front of his eyes. After looking at it, he could not help but scream. Perhaps the thing in front of him was too shocking, causing Sun Tong to put down his hands in surprise. Fortunately, the binoculars' long rope was hanging around his neck. Otherwise, such a valuable thing would have fallen to the ground after losing the binoculars. Sun Tong's shout made the other 4 commanders of the warden's office even more curious. They all surrounded him and asked what was going on. What exactly did he see that caused him to be so shocked and at a loss? Sun Tong did not know how to describe it or how to answer, so he decided to tell his colleagues the truth. He took off the binoculars and handed it to Tao Jin. Tao Jin also imitated Sun Tong and raised the binoculars in front of her eyes. Soon, she also imitated Sun Tong and screamed. Her face was numb and she looked frightened. Ignoring the reactions of the commanders, Yang Chendong's eyes fell on Hu Yin and the girls and said with a smile, "This is the show that Lu Lang wanted you to see. And that is not something, it is an army, a mercenary army." Mercenary army? Hu Yin and the girls were confused. They had seen mercenaries before. Weren't the 100 Long Feng led by Shao Feng mercenaries? Moreover, these people were very polite to the girls, but it seemed that they were not the same. He nodded heavily. Lu Lang would not lie to you. It's just that the military uniforms of these mercenaries are different from the mercenaries you have seen before. Yang Chendong saw the doubts in the girls' eyes. Without waiting for them to ask, he took the initiative to answer. Yang Qindong's explanation made Hu Yin and the other girls nod their heads thoughtfully. While they were talking, this olive-green army of 300 people was rapidly approaching the Yongding city gate. The great Ming city's city guards, who had received the order before, didn't stop the foreign army when they saw them approaching from afar. They just looked at this army that was completely different from theirs with vigilance. They wore light green camouflage uniforms and camouflage hats. They wore a pair of shiny black military high-waisted leather shoes, held a cold black Type 95 pistol in their hands, and carried a large backpack on their backs. There were blankets for them to sleep on, face boxes for them to wash their faces, toiletries, and some necessities for their daily lives. The leader of the group was Longsong, the army commander of the Yang faction's new army. He straightened his body and looked forward with bright eyes. His steps were vigorous, and there was a sense of rhythm to them. Behind him, the 300 men were in a line of 4. There were a total of 75 Lung Feng soldiers marching forward in an orderly manner. Every 25 Lung Feng soldiers would be led by an officer. Unlike ordinary soldiers, they were all carrying exquisite black pistols. Under the protection of the holsters, the pistols were faintly discernible. When they could see the walls of the capital with their naked eyes, the 300 Lung Feng soldiers became highly nervous and excited. Not for anything else, but they would soon be able to see their absolute commander, the founder of this army, Yang Qindong. Everyone seemed very nervous. When the army was 100 meters away from the Yongding city gate, Long Song, who was leading the army, had a solemn and dignified expression. "Second company, get ready. It's time to show our spirit. Everyone, listen to my orders. Comrades, as close as brothers. Get ready to sing. Comrades, as close as brothers. I hope you can call us together. You come from the border. He comes from the interior. We are all children of the country." The neat and loud singing of the second company suddenly sounded. The first to be shocked were the great Ming soldiers guarding the city gate. Chapter 186. When they suddenly heard the neat and heroic singing, they were not shocked, but frightened. Some of the more cowardly ones even threw the spears in their hands to the ground. The more courageous ones also raised their spears and tightly protected their bodies. It was as if they were on the battlefield and were ready to fight at any time. As the song rang out, Sun Pur and the others on the city gate tower, who had been looking uneasy, were startled awake. They were still exclaiming about the magic and power of the telescope. What kind of existence was it to be able to zoom in so close to something so far away? While they were still puzzled and confused, they heard the earth-shattering singing. The 5 of them were startled and woke up from their doubts. The next thing he did was to look down at the 300 mercenaries dressed in strange clothes who were entering the city. Third company, listen up. Soldiers who have been through tough times, get ready to sing. Tongshan's shout suddenly rang out. A firm company, a firm soldier, a firm mind red, a firm bullet with eyes, a firm bayonet stained red with blood, a charge like a gale, a firm iron wall, a firm company with many heroes, a firm soldier is all red. Immediately, a loud voice rang out, echoing the loud and clear singing of the second company in front of them. Wow, this song is so shocking. Just listening to it makes one's blood boil. Who composed this song? From a professional point of view, Lady Xiang and Lady Shui soon came up with a question. Then, they looked at Lu Lang, who belonged to them, with deep meaning. During this period of contact with Yang Qindong, the 2 women had listened to many new songs and songs. Over time, they had become immune to these beautiful songs. At this moment, when they heard such a vigorous new military song, they naturally thought it was composed by Lu Lang. Yang Qindong did not give any answer to this. He just smiled and raised his right hand, greeting the 300 Long Feng who were passing through the city gate. People who did not know saw this and thought it was just a warm greeting. But the Long Feng marching under the city gate tower knew that this was the 6th young master welcoming them. These soldiers are so energetic. Yes, they march in unison. One look, and you can tell that they are an elite army. As expected of a mercenary army. Just by looking at their momentum, the great Ming army can't compare to them. I just don't know how they trained. On the city gate tower, Sun Tong and the other commanders were sighing and envious. At the same time, they had a certain degree of confidence in defending the capital. Under the city gate tower, the company commander of the 4th Company, Wu Shang, took the lead to sing the military song, "Unity is Strength." The entire army smoothly entered the city. Under the leadership of Xiao Feng and the other Long Feng, they strode toward their own small courtyard in the city. Inform all the soldiers in the city not to disturb these mercenaries, even spying on them. They have bad tempers. If they cause trouble, they will bear the consequences. Yang Chendong looked at the team going away in his eyes. Then he ordered Sun Po and the other 4 people. Rest assured, Marquis, the soldiers of the warden's office will be very obedient. Sun Tong took a step forward and cautiously said, however, we can't control the people from the Eastern faction and the embroidered uniform guard. If we can't control them, then don't. Just tell them the news. If anyone is blind enough to go up and lose their life, then it has nothing to do with us. Yang Chendong's lips curled up slightly as a strong sense of confidence spread through his body. Although the embroidered uniform guard and the Eastern faction were very powerful existences in the Great Ming dynasty, they were still nothing in front of the true Long Feng. They were not qualified to be his opponents. The news of the 300 mercenaries entering the city quickly reached the palace and Emperor Zhu Qiyu's ears. They're all here? Are you sure it's 300 people? Zhu Qiyu asked with a trace of suspicion after hearing the news. It was no wonder that he cared so much about the number of people. Every person that appeared represented 20,000 taels of silver. Just thinking about it made one's heart ache. Even though they had exchanged some imperial properties for money, they had still taken out 5 million taels of silver. To the Great Ming dynasty, 5 million taels of silver was almost 2 years of tax revenue. How could Zhu Qiyu's heart not ache? As the emperor's personal attendant, Jin Ying naturally understood the logic behind this. When she heard the emperor ask about the number of mercenaries, she immediately replied, "Your Majesty, don't worry. We have checked the number of mercenaries one by one. 303. This is 3 more than the original request." "Oh, then they won't ask us for more money, right?" Who would have thought that Daizong, Zhu Qiyu's first reaction would be to ask for more money? Jin Ying was very helpless about this. She could only say in an uncertain tone, that shouldn't be the case. After all, we've already given them a few million taels of silver. They shouldn't be short of 60,000 taels of silver. It's good that they won't ask for more money. Zhu Qiyu nodded as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He had only become the emperor for a short while, but he had already experienced so many things. Only leaving and not entering, this seemed to be getting further and further away from his path of becoming a wise emperor. He had no choice but to be more careful. Jin Ying stood at the side. She was still waiting for Zhu Qiyu's instructions. Unexpectedly, there was no more movement from him. For a moment, she had so many things to say in her heart. She couldn't help but say carefully, "Your Majesty, they're here, but we don't know how strong they are. After all, there are only 300 people. Can they defeat the powerful Walla army with just them? This subject is worried about this." Right. After Jin Ying's reminder, Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but nod. After all, there were only 300 people. Even if they added the 100 from before, there were only 400 people. Could they really keep the Walla army out of the capital with just this? Even the emperor, Zhu Qiyu, had some doubts about this. "Beloved subject, in your opinion, what should we do?" This subject isn't sure. But there's nothing wrong with probing. It's just that the loyal Marquis has given strict orders that no one is allowed to disturb these mercenaries. He says that they have bad tempers, and that if they rashly spy on them, someone might die. Thus, this subject doesn't know what to do, Jin Ying said as she turned to look at Zhu Qiyu. Jin Ying truly didn't have much trust in these mercenaries, so she wanted to send someone to probe them. But she was also worried that this would infuriate Yang Chendong and cause him to be in an awkward position. Thus, she had decided to go with Zhu Qiyu's decree. Although he hadn't been emperor for very long, Zhu Qiyu had always been a smart man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become Emperor Jing. After hearing Jin Ying's words, how could he not know what she was thinking? There were some things that needed to be probed to find out. Otherwise, if he really did find a bunch of mediocre people, wouldn't it ruin his important task of guarding the capital? Thus, Zhu Qiyu only needed to think for a moment before saying to Jin Ing, "We also have this concern. Since that's the case, why don't we go and probe them? Presumably, even if something happens, we can say that we didn't know anything. Even the loyal Marquis can't do anything about it." Jining had been waiting for this exact sentence. She had been waiting for this imperial decree. Since even Zhu Qiyu had said this, she naturally felt relieved and said, "Yes, this subject knows what to do." After obtaining the emperor's permission, Jian Ing immediately summoned the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Lu Gue, and gave him instructions on sending someone to probe the strength of the mercenaries. LV Gue had just taken back the 1,000,000 taels of silver and received a new order. When he heard that he was going against Yang Chendong again, he didn't know why, but there was a trace of fear in his heart. Previously, Lu Gue had only thought that Yang Chendong had been lucky enough to reach his current position at such a young age. However, after meeting him in the immortal abode that morning, the other party's aura, which was far beyond his age, made him feel uneasy. Yang Chendong had already said that the mercenaries had bad tempers and were not to be provoked. However, Jin Ying's arrival with an imperial decree put him in a difficult position. Should he send someone to probe? He was worried that he would anger Yang Chendong. The powerful aura that had oppressed him in the morning had yet to completely dissipate. Should he not go? This was the emperor's decree, and also eunuch Jin's orders. Even if he had twice as much courage, he wouldn't dare disobey. I still have to go. But who should I send? Lu Gui's mind began to fill with names and figures. Soon, Hanji's name appeared in his mind. Hanji had offended Yang Chendong. As Shangwan Lu Gue, he was well aware of this. Today, he had been demoted because of a mistake and demoted to a Qianhu. If he were still Commander Qianshi, it wouldn't be appropriate for him to probe. However, a Qianhu wasn't an issue. "Men, bring Qianhu Han here. I have something to discuss with him." Now that he had made up his mind, his tone was filled with confidence. Hanji, from the moment he married his sister to Wang Go, he had already sworn an irreconcilable oath with Yang Chendong. From that moment on, he had already had one foot in the gates of hell. The reason he hadn't killed Hanji before was because of his status. If a Commander Qianshi of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, a dignified fourth-rank official, was suddenly killed, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. This wouldn't benefit Yang Chendong at all. It was better to keep him alive for now and wait for the right opportunity to make a move. However, this morning, Hanji had actually instigated Lu Gue to make trouble for the immortal abode. Just this alone made it clear that he couldn't be allowed to live. After Tiger's Man received the order, he handed this mission to the captain of the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad, Bai Zhuo. This kind of invisible killing was the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad's specialty. After receiving the mission, Bai Zhuo began to look forward to the arrival of night. Chapter 187. Before the sky was completely dark, the people who were watching Hanji sent back a message, saying that he had gone to the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guards, Lu Gue. In less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, he came out again, and then brought 10 embroidered uniform guards with him to an inconspicuous restaurant nearby to drink. Hanji's abnormal behavior was quickly made suspicious by Bai Zhuo after he learned about it. He had just been demoted during the day, so he should be in a bad mood. How could he have the leisure to drink? Even if he was going to drink, he shouldn't have brought 10 skilled brothers with him. There was only one explanation for such behavior, and that was that he had received some kind of mission. Not knowing what Hanji would do, Bai was simply ordered to keep an eye on him. At the same time, all the brothers had to maintain 100% vigilance. They just had to eat some dry food in their respective monitoring positions. If there was an accident because of anyone's carelessness, then they would be expelled from the Ghost Sniper team. With the strict order, the 20 members entered a state of battle preparation. Even when it was time to eat, the snipers and observers ate separately, keeping an eye on Hanji. He was completely monitored, but Hanji didn't realize it. He was still eating meat and drinking with his brothers in the restaurant. "Brothers, the commander said that today's mission is extremely important. This Qianshi also took into account the good relationship between us, so I brought you out to pick up merits. So tonight we can drink, but no one is allowed to drink too much, understand?" Hanji said with a face full of pride. He even called himself Chincher. In fact, this was LV Gue's promise to him. LV Gue said that tonight's mission was to test these new mercenaries and see what kind of level they had. If they were heavily guarded and had strong combat power, then they shouldn't provoke them. But if they were just donkey dung eggs on the surface, then they should teach them a lesson, which was equivalent to making a great contribution. When the time came, he would definitely report to the emperor. At that time, it would be easy to restore his identity as Chincher. Once he entered the eyes of the new emperor, his future would be bright. It was even possible that he would be promoted and become a fellow embroidered uniform guard. Making such a heavy promise was just to make Hanji do his best in his work. Regarding this, Hanji was completely unaware. He only thought that the emperor was suspicious of these mercenaries. In his heart, he thought that as long as he could prove that these mercenaries were incompetent, he would be able to heavily damage Yang Qindong's reputation. At that time, he would definitely make this loyal marquis kneel at his feet and apologize. With such a thought, he was determined to succeed in tonight's operation. He had already thought it through. He would use the knockout incense to subdue these mercenaries. This was also the most common method used by the Imperial Secret Service. If they were caught off guard, no matter what kind of expert they were, they would eventually be knocked to the ground. At that time, wouldn't they be at his mercy? Hanji described a beautiful future, and the 10 brothers all showed expressions of gratitude, thanking him. It was as if they had already made a great contribution. They drank for more than 4 hours until the sky was completely dark and the curfew bell had rung. Only then did Hanji leave the tavern with his brothers and rush toward the courtyard where the mercenaries lived. This scene was clearly seen by the Phantom Sniper Squad. When they saw the direction this group of people was heading, Baizhua quickly understood the other party's intentions. He immediately sent someone to report the situation to the 6th young master. After all, the other party's target was Long Song and the others. Whether they wanted to continue the assassination mission or not, they still needed to obtain Yang Qindong's approval. Under surveillance, Hanji and his 10 trusted subordinates had already arrived at a street away from Longfeng's courtyard. They stopped here, and then each of them looked for a safe place to hide. As experts of the Imperial Secret Service, their hiding skills were naturally not bad. In addition to the cover of the night, if it wasn't for the fact that they were constantly watching them, it would be difficult for Baizhua and the others to discover them without the help of the night vision device. Hanji's group of 11 hid and began to wait. They were waiting for the arrival of night, the moment when a person's body was at its most exhausted. They believed that these mercenaries, who were constantly on the move, would make a mistake even if they arranged for someone to be on night watch. That would be the best time for them to make their move. They didn't ask for too much. As long as they could kill 2 mercenaries, it would be enough to prove that their mission was a success, and that these people's strength was only his immortal abode. It was the largest bedroom in the rear courtyard. When it was built, it was originally reserved for Yang Qindong to rest in. Even though every inch of land here was worth its weight in gold, and even though the 6th young master didn't often come here to rest, the room had always been reserved. This was a sign of everyone's gratitude and respect for him. Since he had taken over the city's military, it was naturally inappropriate for him to rest in the Yang Manor. For the past few days, this place had become Yang Qindong's resting place. At night, Hu Yin and the other 3 girls would accompany him here. For the past few days, they would chat and have a good time. In the room, Yang Qindong was telling stories to the 4 girls and making them happy. Suddenly, he heard Tiger's mane's voice from outside the door. "Young master, Baizhua has sent news." "Wait a minute." Yang Qindong shouted to the outside, then put on a robe. After giving the girls a look to wait for a moment, he walked out of the bedroom and saw Tiger's mane and an observer from the Ghost Shadow Sniper team outside the door. As soon as the observer saw Yang Qindong come out, he half knelt on the ground and showed great respect. "6th young master, when our captain followed Hanji, he found that he took 10 men and rushed to the courtyard where Commander Long Song was resting. The captain asked for instructions on what to do next." "Oh, there's such a thing." Yang Qindong's eyes narrowed slightly after hearing this. Then he quickly smiled and said, "If the King of Hell wants you to die at midnight, who dares to keep you alive until dawn? Since he wants to die so much, we'll fulfill his wish." Tell your captain not to alert the enemy. It's a good opportunity to see how vigilant Long Song is. Also, no matter what the result is, there's no need to keep any of these people alive. Kill them all and hand them over to the security bureau. Let them send these bodies to the genie guard's office as a warning. Since he said before that the mercenaries had bad tempers, whoever provoked them would be unlucky, and if there were still people who wanted to try, then there was no need to be polite. It just so happened that Hanji was also killed, so it saved him some trouble in cleaning up the aftermath. In the dark, the security bureau's people escorted the observer back to Bai's place. After receiving the 6th young master's order, the Ghost Shadow Sniper team quietly stayed in the dark, as if they were one with the night. The cold wind blew, and the drums of the 3rd night watch were beaten. The whole street was silent. A few black shadows covered each other on the street and began to move. The Genie Guard was an important military force that the emperors relied on. It was indeed good. At least, the way they moved forward alternately was very desirable. They always maintained an attacking formation and did not forget to defend. It had to be said that they spent a lot of effort in training. In just a few moments, the 8 figures disappeared into the depths of the street, giving people the feeling that they had never appeared. But in the dark corner, 2 groups of people were waiting for their arrival. Hanji was very careful not to make a move directly. Instead, he stopped there with 2 trusted aides. This way, if there was good news, he could be the first to know. Of course, if the situation was not good, he could also withdraw at the first moment. Perhaps this was the advantage of being an official. The danger was always left to the subordinates, and most of the credit would fall into his hands. Similarly, Bai Zhua and the other 21 people were waiting. The difference was that they had used this time to surround Hanji, who was hiding in the corner, in a fan-shaped formation. That seemingly inconspicuous corner had long become the target of public criticism. This kind of fan-shaped circle could guarantee that once Hanji wanted to leave, no matter which direction he left in, he would at least be facing the muzzles of the 2 snipers. It was really difficult to escape even if he had wings. Hanji, who was unaware of this, was still waiting for the good news. He was very confident in his heart. Not to mention that the 8 men were very skilled. They were also equipped with strong bows and crossbows. Even in the dark, they could guarantee that they could kill the target within 70 steps. Having such strong bows was where Hanji's confidence came from. He closed his eyes and leaned against the corner, even showing a victorious smile on his face. He seemed to have seen the scene of success and the scene of him receiving the reward for the mission. In the courtyard across the street. This courtyard was originally the residence of a prince. Later, because it was sealed outside, it became empty and became the property of the imperial family. This time, when they were discussing with the Ministry of Revenue, Yang Qindong's cousin, Yang Fu, felt that the environment here was good. Most importantly, the territory was big enough, so he took over this courtyard and made it the temporary resting place of the Cold Front soldiers. According to the rules, when they entered the courtyard, Commander Long Song ordered people to do a thorough search. Even though this was the place that the 6th young master had arranged for them, there was no harm in being careful. Yang Qinong often said that it was better to rely on oneself than on others. It was impossible for people not to make mistakes, but a cautious attitude could completely reduce the chances of making mistakes. After this lesson, no matter where the Cold Front soldiers were, no matter how tired they were, they never relaxed their search of the resting place. When they were attacking the central part of Ryukyu Island, they even found 2 hidden enemy soldiers near the resting place. They originally wanted to set fire to the place while the Cold Front soldiers were asleep, but in the end, they were caught by the always cautious new army. Since then, every time they went to a place, a strict search of the surroundings became an iron rule. Chapter 188. After a round of inspection, they didn't find anything wrong. Only then did the army start to cook. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Long Song, who had arranged enough guard work, called the 2 battalion commanders who were acting company commanders to his temporary room. The 3 of them met, and Long Song had no intention of being polite. He bluntly said, "Gentlemen, the 6th young master has been setting up a trap in the capital, and it has been going very smoothly. This time, we were able to come here and show off our skills is also part of the plan. Now that we have smoothly arrived in the capital, It is equivalent to taking the first step. However, the situation will only become more severe. Even before we fight with the Walla army, I'm afraid that the great Ming Empire's capital army will be probing us first. Tung Shan and Wu Sheng both nodded in agreement after hearing Lung Song's words. It was clear that they had the same understanding. Very good. I believe that you can also guess something. That's right. Someone is looking down on us, and I'm afraid that there will be a lot of probing. The sixth young master has already laid the groundwork for this matter. He has already made it clear to the outside world that as mercenaries, we don't have good tempers. In order to confirm this matter, the sixth young master didn't even come here to see us today. Lung Song continued, the sixth young master has already used his actions to tell us everything. The next test will be at any time, and how we perform is very important. Whether we can satisfy or disappoint the sixth young master, it is very likely that everything will happen tonight. Do you understand? Regiment Commander, we all understand. How about this? Please hand over the night duty to us, 3rd Company. I guarantee that we'll complete the mission. No matter who comes, we'll leave no one behind. If we can't complete the mission, I am willing to be punished according to military law. Tung Shan suddenly stood up, and then a resolute expression appeared on his face. Regiment Commander, please give the night duty to our 4th Company. If we can't eliminate all the enemies, I am willing to offer my head. 4th Company Commander Wu Sheng was even more resolute, directly putting his life on the line. Battalion Commander Wu, don't fight with me. In terms of qualifications, you are inferior to me. Tung Shan looked at Wu Sheng with a face full of anger. He was extremely dissatisfied that this person wanted to fight with him for the mission. Battalion Commander Tung, seniority is not enough to feed you. Everything depends on your methods. Our 4th Company is confident that we can complete this mission well. Wu Sheng's eyes were filled with sparks. He looked as if he would start a fight if he didn't agree with Teng Qingshan. The 2 battalion commanders showed that they wanted to fight for the mission, and this made Lung Song nodded with satisfaction. This was the military's morale. If everyone retreated in the face of trouble, then there would be no way to continue fighting this war. It was just that sometimes having confidence was a good thing, but in the end, strength was what determined the outcome of the matter. For example, Lung Song's strength was much stronger than the 2 of them. Whether it was his ability to lead troops, the quality of his soldiers, or the level of his official position, he was better than the 2 of them. That was why he snatched the mission the moment he opened his mouth. All right, there's no need for you guys to fight over it. You're all tired from the day's journey. Let me take over tonight's duty. How can we do that? They objected almost at the same time. Just a moment ago, they were still arguing in full swing, and even seemed like they were going to fight if they didn't agree. Now, they stood on the same line and objected to Lung Song. Why not? My position is the highest here. Lung Song said with an attitude of, I am the regiment commander. You have to listen to me? No. Tung Shan shook his head, showing an attitude of, even if you are the highest official, you can't have the final say. When it was Wu Sheng's turn, he said bluntly, if you want to talk about tiredness, everyone has been walking for the whole day. We are all tired. Why should we rest while your 2nd Company is responsible for the night duty? This is unfair to the brothers of the 2nd Company. I will not agree to this. If Regiment Commander insists on doing this, then tomorrow when I see the 6th young master, I will definitely complain. This is abusing power for personal gain, using force to oppress others. When Wu Sheng said this, Lung Song's eyes widened, but he didn't have the strength to do so. If it was in Crimson City, Lung Song would have done this, and Wu Sheng could only obey as a subordinate. But now, the 6th young master was right in front of them, and they would see him tomorrow. It was no wonder that he dared to say this. This would indeed put a lot of pressure on Lung Song, and he didn't want someone to complain about him the moment he saw the 6th young master. That's right. If you don't give us a chance, I will also complain when I see the 6th young master tomorrow. Tung Shan saw that this seemed to be effective and immediately followed suit. The 2 battalion commanders had the same attitude, and Lung Song knew that it was impossible to use his position to oppress others for the mission. He could only sigh and say, then let's draw lots. Tonight, the 3 of us will take turns to be on duty. As for whether or not there will be any accidents, and who will encounter them, It will all depend on everyone's luck. That's good. Hearing that it was a draw, Tung Shan and Wu Sheng immediately felt that it was fair. Immediately, a smile appeared on their faces, completely different from their previous flushed faces. And if this scene was seen by Hanji, he would definitely regret coming to test them. Who would have thought that in the face of danger, there would still be people fighting to go forward? With such morale, what kind of enemy couldn't be defeated and dealt with? After drawing lots, Lung Song's luck was very bad for the first half of the night. Tung Shan's luck wasn't very good either, drawing a lot near dawn. Only Wu Sheng, when he saw that the lot he drew was between the third and fourth day, he was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. All right, some people don't need to be so happy. We just arrived today. Maybe they will want to take a look before they try to test us. Tung Shan looked at Wu Sheng with some jealousy. On the other hand, Lung Song, as expected of a regiment commander, was very open-minded. Seeing that the results were out, he said with a serious face, "No matter what happens, everyone must be careful when you are on duty. One of the sentries must be in the light while the other two are in the dark, forming a triangle to ensure that nothing goes wrong. All right, you guys can go and prepare." While Long Song let the 2 battalion commanders prepare, he also transferred 2 platoon leaders and 10 elite brothers from the 2nd company. Although he said that the lot was drawn early and that the enemy would rarely appear between the 1st and 2nd day of the night, Lung Song still made preparations to meet the enemy during the operation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have directly transferred 2 platoon leaders to be in charge of the sentries. But no matter how thorough the preparations were, seeing that the 2nd day of the night had passed and the 3rd day of the night had arrived, there was no abnormality in the outside world. Lung Song sighed, somewhat disappointed, and wanted to arrange for someone to inform Wu Sheng. "Haha, no need to trouble the regiment commander. I'm already here." Unknowingly, Wu Sheng brought people and appeared behind Lung Song. Looking at the other party's camp, it was actually also led by 2 platoon leaders, and there were also quite a few squad leaders and vice-squad leaders. Looking at this camp, Lung Song knew that there was no need to remind the other party to be careful. When he left, he only patted the other party's shoulder. But at this moment, silence really spoke louder than words. Wu Sheng took over the defense and quickly started to set up according to the plan. Around the small courtyard, the 12 people he brought along split into 3 groups, with 2 in the dark and 1 in the light. He himself found a safe corner and stayed in the middle, constantly looking around with the night vision device in his hand. In his heart, he was still praying that if there were any enemies, they must appear when he was on duty. This was a good opportunity to show his face in front of the 6th young master. Perhaps their prayers had worked. Just a quarter of an hour after Wu Sheng and the others had hidden themselves, there was finally some movement on the wall of the courtyard. Although it was very slight, it was still discovered by the brothers who were in charge of guarding the courtyard. Speaking of which, this was all due to the camouflage training of the cold front line. Camouflage was created by Yang Qindong and was improved based on his training when he was a soldier. The requirement was that any qualified cold front line must be able to stay in the same place for 24 hours without eating or drinking. This was the ability. To be able to stay in the same place for 24 hours was only a pass. 2 days was considered good, and 3 days was considered excellent. At first, many people did not understand this training, thinking that it did not require much skill, and the training was not meaningful. However, after a real test, after staying in the same place for 24 hours without moving, everyone realized how important this training was to train their mentality. It was precisely because of this training that the cold front members' violent tempers were much more restrained. This kind of training also allowed many of them to learn how to calm their hearts. This was to ensure that they would be able to face everything calmly under any kind of dangerous situation. The camouflage training also allowed every cold front line to have the potential to become an excellent sentry. It meant that at any time, anyone would be able to complete the task of being on guard. It was because of the inhuman training that the Imperial bodyguards did not discover the 8 hidden sentry. They only saw the 4 open sentry. It was the existence of the sentries that caused the 8 embroidered uniform guards to let down their guard. They carefully observed their surroundings, and after finding that there was nothing out of the ordinary, they began to slowly move towards the 4 sentries. The open sentry was located in the center of the courtyard, far beyond the distance of 70 steps. The Imperial bodyguards' bows could not reach the sentry, so if they wanted to get anything, they had to keep moving closer. However, they did not know that this method of approaching the sentry was bringing them closer to the Grim Reaper. The 8 Imperial bodyguards did have some skills. If it was not for the hidden sentry, it would not have been easy to discover them. However, even though they were discovered, Wu Shang, who was hiding in the corner and watching everything with his night vision, did not immediately give the order to close the net. It was because he was not sure if the enemy had any reinforcements. This time, he wanted to catch all of them in one fell swoop. If even one of them escaped, it would be considered a failure. Chapter 189. He carefully observed his surroundings, waiting to see if the other party still had any tricks up his sleeve. The 8 embroidered uniform guards had climbed over the high wall and were approaching the 4 sentries. Some of them had even taken out the strong bows on their backs, but Wu Shang still did not see any backup. It should be these people. Even if they have backup plans, they won't be able to enter the courtyard. Wu Shang quickly made a decision based on the situation. He then slowly stood up and moved his right hand to his mouth. Hand signals in the day and whistles at night. That was how the cold vanguards communicated with each other. Wu Shang placed his right hand to his mouth and concentrated his qi into his dantian. He exhaled fiercely, and a sharp whistle was emitted from his mouth. It was especially bright and clear in the silent night. As soon as the whistle was emitted, 6 of the 8 sentries who had been waiting impatiently appeared in the darkness. The 95 style that they had been holding tightly in their hands spat out bright flames in the darkness. They fired directly at the embroidered uniform guards who had their backs facing them. Bang! 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 6 of the 8 embroidered uniform guards were knocked down by the first wave of attacks. The other 2 were also shocked by the sound. One of them stood there in a daze and was hit by the second wave of gunfire. The other reacted quickly and rolled on the ground, trying to find a safe place to hide. However, he was killed by a single shot just as he stood up. This shot was fired by Wu Shang. Under the night vision goggles, any dodging was meaningless. Bang! 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 Footsteps were heard in the courtyard. One of the cold vanguards who was in charge of guarding the courtyard had rushed over to provide backup. Nothing was absolute. They would always have a backup plan. That was how the cold vanguards operated. As for the other cold vanguards, they were still sleeping in their rooms. Gunshots in the middle of the night had happened before. As long as the gunshots were not too intense, they had the right to not get out of bed. Search. See if there are any more enemies outside. Check if the enemies are completely dead. After Wu Shang killed an embroidered uniform guard with a single shot, he walked out of the darkness and commanded everyone with a smile on his face. Although this was nothing compared to Long Feng's previous battles, it was equivalent to showing his face in front of the 6th young master. No matter how he looked at it, it was a joyous occasion. Some people were examining the body, while others had already jumped onto the wall to look outside. However, from the beginning to the end, there were still 2 hidden sentries who did not move at all. This was a precautionary measure. It had to be said that under Yang Qindong's training, the cold vanguard guards had already become elites. If the great Ming dynasty's imperial guards wanted to use strong bows to deal with them, not to mention 8 people, even if 80 or even 800 people came, they still wouldn't be able to gain the slightest advantage. Outside the courtyard, the sudden sound of gunfire startled Han Ji and the other 2. Their instinctive reaction was that something must have happened to the people they sent out. They must have been discovered. As for whether they succeeded or not, and whether they killed or injured their mercenary brothers, they would only know when they saw their brothers who escaped. Han Ji did not move. He was still waiting. Baizhua moved. The gunshot was the signal, and it was time for him to wrap things up. The whistle that signaled the attack was somewhat abrupt in the silent night. This also attracted the attention of Han Ji, who was hiding in a corner and waiting for news. What's that sound? He looked around vigilantly and asked his 2 subordinates who were hiding in the corner. It sounds like a whistle, but it's already the curfew. Who would blow such a thing on the streets in the middle of the night? One of the subordinates touched his head with a puzzled expression. Mei Chim? This is not good. Let's go. On the other hand, Han Ji was worthy of being the commander of the embroidered uniform guards. His reaction was not slow. Although he could not figure out what was wrong, His instincts told him that the situation was not right. The safest thing to do now was to retreat. As he spoke, he rushed out of the corner in a flash. The moment he rushed out, a fiery light flashed in the darkness, staring at the place he had just been hiding. It had been less than half a breath's worth of time, and it would have taken his life. Perhaps it was due to good luck or some other reason, but this shot did not take Hanji's life. However, his two subordinates did not have such good luck. While they were still in a daze, their bodies fell to the ground. Their bodies violently rose and fell several times, and then there was no more movement. When he turned his head to look, he saw the scene of his two subordinates dying on the spot. Cold sweat poured down his forehead. At this moment, Hanji was certain that he had been targeted, and if he was not mistaken, it was the work of mercenaries. After all, in the capital, there were very few people who dared to attack an embroidered uniform guard and an official of the embroidered uniform guard on the streets. "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I'm only passing by. I have no intention of making things difficult for you." Knowing the power of the new firearms, Hanji did not dare to take any chances. He was afraid that in the next moment, he would die on the spot like his subordinates, so he simply stopped hiding. He stood up and stood in the middle of the street, and then loudly shouted. This shout was not only to express his submission, but also to attract the attention of the night watchmen in the capital. Although it was a curfew, the people of the 5 cities' warden's office still had the right to walk on the streets, patrol, and protect the law and order. Bah! A crisp sound rang out as soon as Hanji stood up, and then a piercing pain came from his leg. The strong pain made him half kneel on the ground with a plop, and the cold sweat on his face dripped like rain. The half-kneeling Hanji did not understand. He had already surrendered. So why did these people still have no intention of letting him go? Did they really want to kill him? "I am the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, a 4th-rank official of the court. You can't kill me, or else it will be very troublesome." Seeing that begging for mercy was not going to work, Hanji used intimidation. But no matter how he shouted, in the eyes of the ghost snipers, he was already a dead man. Daring to find trouble with the 6th young master was tantamount to being sentenced to death. No matter who pleaded for mercy, it was useless. Bah! Another sniper shot rang out. This time, it hit Hanji's left leg. Blood splattered. The bullet directly passed through the flesh of the thigh and quickly left. With a piercing wound, Hanji fell to his knees with a plop, unable to move an inch. No, no. Tears fell like rain. Hanji was so scared that he actually cried. If they had killed him directly, it might not have been so painful. However, this kind of torture was the best way to break a person's heart. Back then, there were many people who had been captured and tortured to death by him. Thinking about how they were unable to live or die, he even laughed out loud at that time. God made fools of people. Who would have thought that it would be his turn now? Bah! Another shot hit him in the left shoulder. His body could not help but tilt, almost falling to the ground. Kill me, kill me. This feeling of facing death at any time made Hanji's mind begin to collapse. At this time, he no longer hoped to live, only to die quickly, which was also a kind of happy relief. However, the gunshots that should have sounded did not continue, and everything seemed to be quiet. There was only the faint sound of blood flowing out of the body. After half an hour, about a third of the blood in his body had flowed out. Without any emergency treatment, Hanji finally fell into a coma due to excessive blood loss. Then, he slowly died. Of course, they did not directly kill Hanji because they did not want to let him off too easily. Feeling the feeling of death bit by bit was the result that Bai Zhua and the others wanted. The night wind blew, bringing with it the smell of blood, and then slowly dissipated into the air. The people living nearby only heard the crisp sound of firecrackers in the middle of the night, but no one knew what exactly happened, and no one had the courage to come out and take a look. It was not until the sky was completely bright that the people walked out of their houses. At this moment, the gate of the embroidered uniform guard's office was very lively, and 11 corpses, including Hanji, were neatly lined up there. No one knew who sent these corpses, and the first people who found them were the soldiers of the warden's office patrolling the nearby 5 cities. The 11 people sent out were all dead, including Hanji. When the news reached LV Gue's ears, his face was pale and unsightly. Collect the corpses, send a coroner to examine them, and report the results to me. After saying this to his subordinates, LV Gue plopped back into his chair. When he sent out this mission, LV Gue did not think that it would fail. But even if he was mentally prepared, he did not think that they would fail so miserably, and that even Hanji would be dead. LV Gue understood Hanji's subordinate quite well. He was not very courageous, and could bully people by relying on the might of the tiger, but he was not brave enough to take risks and fight with his life. Logically speaking, such a person would not follow an ordinary embroidered uniform guard to carry out a mission. But why did he die? Could it be that these mercenaries were really so powerful? When he thought of this, LV Gue did not feel happy at all, and instead became very nervous. If it was really like this, would these mercenaries let it go? Would they come to find trouble with him because of this? Humans were like this. The losing side of a battle would always feel that they were weak, as if they were afraid that the other side would not let them go. But LV Gue did not think about it. If he did not send people to investigate, how could there be such a result? LV Gue was still dizzy in the room, and his mood was somewhat uneasy. The coroner he sent out returned with news that the 11 corpses were all killed by gunpowder, but unfortunately, there was no gunpowder residue found on their bodies. Looking at the wounds, it should be that the gunpowder that entered the bodies of the embroidered uniform guards was dug out after they died. Chapter 190. He's already dead. Why won't they let him go? This is going too far. After hearing the coroner's report, Lu Gue roared angrily. But before he could vent his anger, a subordinate came in to report that the Marquis of Loyalty Yang Chendong had arrived with 100 soldiers from the warden's office. They had already passed the gatehouse and were heading towards the inner courtyard. Upon hearing that Yang Chendong had arrived, Lu Gue immediately guessed his intentions. He immediately said anxiously, "Who let them in? Can't you stop them?" "Commander, we can't stop them. Marquis Yang has the command token of the embroidered uniform guard. None of us dared to stop him." The embroidered uniform guard who had reported the news replied with an aggrieved expression, "Tell him that I'm not here." As Lu Gue spoke, he looked around. It was clear that he wanted to find a safe place to hide. Bang! With a muffled sound, the door was kicked open from the outside. Yang Chendong, with a murderous look, appeared in front of LV Gue with hundreds of soldiers from the warden's office of the 5 cities. At first, there was a cry of alarm, but Lu Gue quickly reacted. He forced himself to remain calm and asked Yang Chendong in a questioning tone, "Marquis Yang, what are you doing? Do you know what kind of crime it is to bring people into the embroidered uniform guard?" Lu Gue's appearance at this moment was fierce on the outside, but timid on the inside. In response to Lu Gue's howls and questioning, the soldiers of the warden's office standing opposite him all laughed coldly. This time, to be able to follow the Marquis of Loyalty into the embroidered uniform guard was a very glorious thing. With today's experience, it was likely that in the future, he would have something to brag about with his colleagues. In the past, it was always the embroidered uniform guard who found trouble with them. Everyone was a soldier and ate grain, but the treatment was very different. Now that Yang Chendong was here, it was different. How awe-inspiring was it to openly charge into the embroidered uniform guard to arrest someone? Just thinking about it made one's blood boil. LV Gue was still shouting, still showing off his might. It could even be said that he was acting shamelessly. Yang Chendong snorted disdainfully and said, "As the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, you still have the face to talk about Marquis. Do you know that last night, there were brothers from the embroidered uniform guard who went looking for trouble with the mercenaries? Because of this, they almost injured their people. Now that they are asking for an explanation from us, how do you think I should answer?" When Yang Chendong asked this question, Lu Gue suddenly became weak. But when he thought about how Hanji and the others were already dead, and how there was no evidence that he had sent them on a mission, he regained his confidence. What does this have to do with me? Hanji and the others did it on their own accord. If you want an explanation, just look for them. Look for them? How can you even say that? You want Marquis to argue with the dead? Yang Chendong continued to ask angrily. But then, He suddenly stopped and his voice became much colder. Fine, you can deny it. Right now, those mercenaries want Marquis to give them an explanation. They even said that if they are not satisfied, they will immediately leave the capital. If Walla's army comes, you will be the one to face them. Humph. After explaining the seriousness of the matter, Yang Chendong did not waste any more words and turned to leave. He really came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Yang Chendong actually left just like that, causing Lu Gue to be a little confused. But when he thought about what Yang Chendong said, if the mercenaries really left because of this, then who would bear the responsibility of protecting the capital? Would it be him? It was not that he was looking down on himself, but Lu Gue really did not have the confidence to do this matter well. Even Ingzong and Shi Hong with 500,000 soldiers had been defeated. How could he win against Walla? Wait, loyal Marquis, wait a moment. Considering the seriousness of the matter, Lu Gue had no choice but to shout. As he shouted, he quickly ran out. If he allowed Yang Chendong to leave just like that, he would be guilty of too much. Of course, Yang Chendong would not leave too quickly. Defending the capital and defeating Walla was part of his plan. Even if no one asked him to do it, he would still do it. What he said just now was just to scare the other party and to gain more benefits. How could he really let the mercenaries leave because of this? How could he really allow Walla, a foreign race, to bully the Han people? After hearing Lu Gue's shout, Yang Chendong naturally stopped. But when he turned around, he still had a serious expression and asked, "Commander, why did you call for Marquis? Since you don't know about this matter, I'll ask Eunuch Jean. If Eunuch Jean doesn't care, then just let the mercenaries leave. This Marquis will be able to put down the heavy burden of guarding the capital." Sigh. Speaking of which, Marquis is still too young. When he took on this task, he was too loyal. Yang Chendong's words made LV Gue even more stunned after hearing it. When he heard that there would be such serious consequences, he knew that this was not something he could bear. Immediately, a smile appeared on his face. "Marquis Yang, don't be anxious. Can we discuss this matter properly?" Although Hanji's actions were purely personal, he is still a member of the Imperial Guard. After thinking about it, this commander also has some responsibility. "Marquis Yang, how do you want compensation? If the amount is not too large, this commander can do his part." Lu Gue admitted defeat. Yang Chendong smiled in his heart and his face brightened. "Good. It's good that you have this attitude. As for the compensation, the mercenaries have already spoken to Marquis. 500,000 taels of silver can settle this matter." Lu Gue was originally smiling, but when he heard the number of 500,000 taels, he immediately jumped up. "How much? This is impossible." "No, no." Lu Gue was still waving his hands and shouting wildly as if he had been bitten. Yang Chendong snorted coldly. "Forget it. Since the commander doesn't have it, I will ask Eunuch Jean. If he doesn't have it, then let them leave." Yang Chendong turned around and walked away. He didn't have the slightest reluctance, which made Lu Gue stunned. If the performer did not have an audience, what was the point of such a performance? Marquis Yang, don't be anxious. Let's discuss it again." Lu Gue continued to chase after Yang Chendong. In the palace, Jean Ying, who had been paying attention to the situation, rushed to the emperor's resting quarters as soon as she received the news. The situation in the capital was not stable. In the past few days, many officials were sending their families out of the city. Due to the complicated and chaotic situation, there was no morning court. With Zhu Qiyu's permission, the court was changed from one day to one every 3 days. When Jining arrived at the palace, Zhu Qiyu was eating breakfast sent by the imperial kitchen. "Oh, my beloved official, you are here. Have you eaten breakfast? Let's eat together." The emperor asked an official to accompany him for breakfast. This was already a great favor. Jean Ying was overwhelmed by the favor. If it had been in the past, she would have sat down and served the emperor's breakfast. But now, she was not in the mood to do so. "Your Majesty, is there a result from the mercenaries sent to test the waters?" "What result?" Zhu Qiyu, who had been indifferent, stopped moving his chopsticks when he heard Jean Ying's words. He raised his head and asked seriously. "There are good and bad results." Jean Ying panicked when Zhu Qiyu looked at her. For a moment, She did not know how to describe what she wanted to say. What does my beloved official mean? Zhu Qiyu was also confused by her words. Perhaps she knew that her description was not appropriate. So Jianing hurriedly explained, Your Majesty, the brocade guard followed your orders and went to the mercenaries' temporary camp last night. There were 11 people in total. 11 people died. This morning, they all fell in front of the brocade guard yamen. The people I sent to investigate have returned. Last night, they faintly heard the sound of gunfire. As he spoke, he observed Zhu Qiyu. When he found that Zhu Qiyu was listening attentively, he continued, This is the good news. Facts have proven that this mercenary group does indeed possess extraordinary strength, and they are very vigilant. But they asked for compensation on the grounds that someone was spying on their camp. They asked for 500,000 taels of silver. At this time, the Marquis of Loyalty is representing the mercenaries and communicating with the brocade guard commander Lu Gue. Zhu Qiyu's expression darkened as he listened to Jin Ying's report. When he knew that the mercenaries were strong, he had more confidence in the defense of the capital. But when he heard that the mercenaries were asking for 500,000 taels of silver as compensation for last night's spying, his expression changed drastically. He said, Can you investigate whether anyone died last night? Your Majesty, the Marquis of Loyalty has already given us the answer. The mercenaries did not die. They were only disturbed for a moment. Jining repeated what Yang Chendong had said to Lu Gue. No casualties? Then why did they ask for 500,000 taels of silver? Do they think that my silver and the national treasury's silver fell from the sky? How preposterous. Zhu Qiyu's face was filled with anger. It was obvious that he was angry. It was true that he was the emperor of a country. It was also true that he was wealthy. But the more he was like this, the more he valued his dignity more than anything else. The ones who had died were the brocade guard. The mercenaries had not only killed people, but they also wanted money. This was a threat and extortion. As the emperor of a country, if he backed down and agreed to the other party's request, wouldn't he be lowering his head? If that was the case, how could he lead a country in the future? Seeing that the emperor was angry, Jin Ying's expression turned bitter. The thing he was worried about had happened. The emperor wanted face. The mercenaries' actions had clearly touched his dragon scales. This was no longer a matter of 500,000 taels of silver. It was a matter of the country's dignity. Logically speaking, the mercenaries' actions were a little excessive. If it weren't for the fact that the other party had advanced firearms and powerful battle prowess, with Jin Ying's personality, he wouldn't have reported this matter to the emperor. Instead, he would have privately ordered the brocade guards and the East faction guards to arrest these people. At that time, he would use practical actions to tell the other party what they couldn't do and who they couldn't provoke. Chapter 191. But after what had happened last night, he truly didn't have the confidence to do such a thing. And now that the safety of the capital was in danger, he couldn't use violence to suppress the enemy. Otherwise, before Walla's army arrived, he would be thrown into chaos. After all, the emperor had spent a great deal of money to ask Yang Chendong to hire these mercenaries, so there could be no problems at this time. Otherwise, the defense of the capital would probably develop in the worst possible direction. And if Zhu Qiyu lost the capital, he would essentially lose the throne. In the south, there was still Ingzong keeping an eye on this place. If there was a chance to deal a heavy blow to the throne, Ingzong probably wouldn't show any mercy. If Zhu Qiyu was no longer the emperor, what was a great eunuch like him? When the time came, many people would probably try to capture him and bring him to Ingzong to claim credit. Even if it was for her own sake, Jining still had to warn Zhu Qiyu. Even though she knew that he was currently in a bad mood, she still had to say what needed to be said. Your Majesty, a lack of forbearance in small matters will spoil great plans. We've already spent 10 million taels of silver, so we don't mind spending another 500,000 taels. As long as Your Majesty agrees, I can privately resolve this problem and do my best to prevent this matter from spreading. What does Your Majesty think? Jin Ying wanted to ask Zhu Qiyu to back down. As soon as she said this, as the emperor of a country, of course he was displeased. He kept a straight face and didn't say yes or no. Zhu Qiyu truly didn't want to lower his head. This was the dignity of a country. not just a matter of 500,000 taels of silver. With his hands behind his back, Zhu Qiyu stood up from the table and walked to the window, looking into the distance. Although all he could see were tall and majestic palaces, it didn't stop him from expressing his feelings. He was very angry. Jin Ing couldn't help but panic at Zhu Qiyu's cold attitude. "Your Majesty, this matter can't wait any longer. Please reconsider." The embroidered uniform guard had been the cause of this incident. If the mercenaries were allowed to leave and the capital was lost, all the blame would fall on the head eunuch. He would be the second Wang Zhan, and even the history books would record him as a sinner for all eternity. Therefore, in Jin Ying's heart, even if the mercenaries wanted to leave, it could not be because of the brocade guard. At this moment, he really regretted what he did last night. Jin Ying's pleas didn't get any response from Zhu Qiyu. He didn't even turn his head. It was as if he hadn't heard anything. What should we do? Jin Ying was very anxious, but as an official, there was nothing he could do about the emperor's attitude. All he could do was sigh in his heart. Reporting, just as Jin Ying was feeling helpless and Zhu Qiyu was speechless, another chief eunuch, Ru Zhu, arrived outside the palace. As soon as he appeared, he knelt on the ground with a panicked expression, his body trembling slightly. Ru Zhu had only been a court eunuch in Dai Zong's time, and hadn't been particularly outstanding. After Jin Ying took the throne, this man had quickly been promoted to supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, a position that had been guaranteed by the dead monk Qian. He was primarily responsible for communicating with the Bureau of Military Personnel and was in charge of military affairs. Jin Ying was standing at the gate. When he saw that it was Ru Zhu, he instinctively believed that the matter had gotten out of hand and that LV Gue had not received the decree and was not willing to pay, so the mercenaries were preparing to leave the capital. When he thought of this possibility, his face paled. Is there something important? There is. The Bureau of Military Personnel has just received news from scouts that the vanguard of the Walla army is less than 150 li from the capital. Tomorrow, they will appear at the walls of the capital. As Ru Zhu spoke, he raised his head, revealing a panicked expression. What? Repeat that for us. Zhu Qiyu, who had been facing away from the gate, finally turned around. Not only that, he quickly walked over to Ru Zhu, who was still kneeling on the ground. When Ru Zhu saw that the emperor was asking, he didn't dare to hesitate and immediately replied, "Reporting to your Majesty, the Bureau of Military Personnel has sent news that the vanguard of the Walla army, 10,000 cavalry, is heading toward the capital. They are less than 150 li from here and will arrive at the city gates tomorrow." So fast? Hearing that the Walla cavalry would arrive at the city gates tomorrow, Zhu Qiyu's face became serious and panicked. The other party was an elite cavalry. Although there were only 10,000 of them, the 10,000 ordinary soldiers in the city couldn't compare to them. Although there wasn't much difference in numbers, more than half of the great Ming dynasty's elites had been lost in the Battle of the Timu Fortress. Later on, when Admiral Shi Hong led the troops to battle, he had taken the remaining elites with him. Now, there was only a second-rate army left in the city. How could they stop the Walla army? Thinking that the Walla army would be at the foot of the capital tomorrow, and that they might charge into the capital tomorrow, his position as emperor might come to an end, he couldn't help but stagger a few steps and his body became unstable. Jin Ying reacted quickly and quickly reached out to support Zhu Qiyu, who was 30 years younger than her, and asked with concern, "Your Majesty, are you all right?" "Jin is fine. Beloved subject, the enemy's cavalry is about to arrive. What can we do?" Zhu Qiyu no longer had the stern look on his face. In exchange, he was panicking and lost his mind. It had to be said that Zhu Qiyu was miserable enough. He wasn't even 22 years old, but under the urging of his officials, he had taken over a mess in this chaotic world. Then, accidents happened again and again. He, who hadn't fully grasped the imperial power, was like a small boat in the ocean that could be swallowed by the waves at any time. How could he not be nervous and afraid? "Your Majesty, it's fine. Don't we still have the mercenaries?" Moreover, the loyal Marquis has already taken charge of guarding the capital. It's time for them to show their loyalty to the country, Jin Ying advised as she supported Zhu Qiyu. Right. There's still the loyal Marquis and the mercenaries. How about this? Immediately take out 500,000 taels of silver from the national treasury to the loyal marquis and the mercenaries. But remember, last night's incident was the embroidered uniform guard acting on their own. It has nothing to do with us. This silver can only be considered what the embroidered uniform guard owes us. In this dire situation, Zhu Qiyu finally relented, but he did not forget the dignity of the sovereign of a country. Jianing also knew that in this situation, this was not the time to haggle over the 500,000 taels of silver, so she immediately agreed. Your Majesty, be at ease. This subject will handle this matter, and will definitely handle it beautifully. I will not lose face and decorum for the imperial household. Good. With beloved subject handling matters, we are at ease. Quickly go and handle it, Zhu Qiyu said with a hint of anxiety. At this moment, all his hopes were placed on Yang Qindong and the mercenaries he had spent a fortune to hire. The Yamen of the embroidered uniform guard. LV Gue was currently drinking tea with Yang Qindong. The two of them did not communicate much, but in their hearts, they both knew that they were waiting for news from the imperial palace. After all, this involved 500,000 taels of silver and the imperial household's face. The final decision still needed the emperor's decree. Yang Qindong, who was sipping his tea unhurriedly, showed enough confidence at this moment. He insisted that Zhu Qiyu would definitely give in. All of this came from the news he had received last night. The Walla's vanguard cavalry of 10,000 people was approaching the great Ming dynasty's capital. If nothing unexpected happened, they would arrive at the city tomorrow. The Yangtze Security Bureau was willing to spend a lot of silver and gold. The information they received was even earlier than the great Ming dynasty's imperial household. However, this news would probably reach the imperial palace today and reach Zhu Qiyu's ears. Then, the new emperor would have no choice but to give in. Speaking of which, Yang Qindong did not lack the 500,000 taels of silver. However, he insisted on doing this to warn all parties not to easily inquire about the mercenaries. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. Presumably, after what happened this morning, whoever had such an idea would have to think twice before acting. Maintaining the mystery of the mercenaries was also of great significance for future actions. This was also part of the plan to pave the way for some future actions. With such a significance, in order to achieve the goal, what could he do even if he had to confront the genie guards? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he did not do it openly at this time, he was afraid that it would be more troublesome to do it in the future. Yang Qindong's indifference and confidence in LV Gue's eyes made him even more anxious. Unconsciously, there was a difference in the momentum between the two people. Psychologically, Yang Qindong had already won a round. LV Gue even had a thought in his heart that it was better not to provoke this person in the future, because no matter what, it seemed that he would be the one to suffer in the end. In the past, LV Gue would not have dared to think that someone would dare to cause trouble in the genie guards. It was good enough that he did not bring people to cause trouble. Who would dare to take the initiative to come to the door? But today, not only did it happen, but he also had no way to deal with it. This made it difficult for him. In his heart, he only wanted the emperor and eunuch Jean to quickly make a decision. He even faintly thought in his heart, wasn't it just 500,000 taels of silver? Just give it to the loyal marquis. LV Gue's heart had already begun to show weakness. It was at this time that Rougeau arrived. At the same time, he brought the emperor's oral decree for the genie guards commander LV Gue. In the inner hall of the genie guards, LV Gue knelt to receive the imperial decree, appearing extremely respectful. It was worth mentioning that Yang Qindong only stood up from the chair when Rougeau was about to deliver the emperor's decree. He did not have the slightest intention of kneeling on the ground. Just this kind of behavior was a great disrespect. Logically speaking, it was enough to arrest him. But at this time, whether it was the supervising eunuch Rougeau or the genie guards commander LV Gue, they cleverly pretended not to see. At this time, it was not the time to have a dispute. Chapter 192. His Majesty's Verbal Decree. The genie guards acted recklessly and attracted the displeasure of the mercenaries, so they should be punished. But considering the national crisis, Jean will remember this matter. As for the 500,000 taels, Jean will withdraw it from the national treasury first. Later, Jean will slowly deduct it from the genie guard's yamen. Also, I hope Lu Gue can learn from this lesson and control his subordinates well. Don't do things that are not beneficial to the country. With a serious face and warning tone, Rouju reprimanded Lu Gue on behalf of the emperor. Finally, there was a result, and it was the compensation method he had thought of. LV Gue breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He was not worried about being reprimanded at all. This matter was originally the emperor's idea. He was just taking the blame on behalf of others. Nothing would happen. This subject receives the decree and thanks His Majesty's grace. Lu Gue knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to show respect to the emperor. After Rouju finished telling Lu Gue about the emperor's instructions, he turned to Yang Chendong and said, "Loyal Marquis, the emperor also has a verbal decree for you. This subject receives the decree." Yang Chendong cupped his fists. His face was very respectful, but the words he said were not respectful at all, asking the envoy to pass on my behalf. This subject fell off a horse during the Battle of Earth and Wood, which triggered an old injury. Now, I can't kneel, asking for forgiveness. When Zhu Qiyu of Insect was still alive, he let Yang Chendong organize 3rd Princess Changda's birthday banquet. To put it bluntly, he was just looking for trouble out of jealousy. At that time, after Yang Chendong organized the birthday banquet, in order to not give others an excuse to deal with him, he lied that he fell off a horse and injured his body. Now, he said that he fell off a horse during the Battle of Earth and Wood, which triggered an old injury, so he couldn't kneel. Speaking of which, it was a coincidence. But he didn't think about it. The current Yang Chendong wasn't even 20 years old. Even if he really suffered an injury, at this age, he should have recovered. However, he still used this as an excuse. It was clear that he did not respect the imperial power. When Rouju heard this, he was dissatisfied. However, considering that it was time to put the other party in an important position, if he haggled over such a small matter and delayed the important matter, the gains would not make up for the losses. Thus, he could only close one eye and say, "It's fine." The emperor's verbal order is only for the Marquis of Zhongdan and this eunuch to discuss how to retreat from the enemy. Right. Walla's vanguard cavalry will arrive at the capital tomorrow, but how will the loyal Marquis deal with them? As the supervising eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Rouju had the authority to give orders on military matters. At this moment, he was asking about how to deal with the enemy. Naturally, it was within the scope of his authority, so it was reasonable. Of course, Yang Chenong knew who Rouju was. He also knew that Rouju was here on behalf of the imperial power. To put it bluntly, Rouju was here to supervise the army and monitor his every move. This was also one of the characteristics of the great Ming dynasty. No matter where the war occurred, no matter how large the scale of the war, there would always be eunuchs participating in supervising the army. This was also a sign that the emperor wanted to control everything in his hands. However, he did not know that it was a great taboo for someone who did not know how to fight to lead an army. Just like in Tomb of Castle, Guojing, as the supervising eunuch, played a role in restricting the great Ming dynasty's elite army, causing them to lose the best opportunity to fight due to internal friction and suffer a crushing defeat. With the previous example, how could Yang Chendong allow eunuchs to participate in military matters? Immediately, he replied with a serious expression, "Eunuch Ru, as for how to deal with the enemy, I still need to discuss with the mercenaries. Of course, with the 500,000 taels of silver, we can show our sincerity. As for how to fight the war, I'm afraid that right now, it's not up to you or me to decide. So it's like this. However, I don't know if this eunuch can go with the loyal Marquis to take a look at the mercenaries' barracks," Rouju said with a modest expression. This was also Zhu Qiyu's intention. Although it was true that the mercenaries were invited by Yang Chendong, they were using his money. He couldn't monopolize them, could he? If possible, he would have his own people contact the mercenaries. If he could use them, wouldn't it be better? He wouldn't have to trouble the loyal Marquis with everything. To put it bluntly, he was burning the bridge after crossing the river. Zhu Qiyu wanted to get rid of Yang Chendong, the middleman. Among the people, this was called forgetting one's mother after getting a wife. How could Yang Chendong not see through this little trick? No one knew that the mercenaries were actually the new young Xiao army under his command. The only reason he didn't reveal this relationship was because the timing wasn't right. As for people wanting to take advantage of the cold front, he wasn't worried at all. It was simply a waste of wax for a blind man to light a lamp. Because it wasn't time to reveal this relationship, Yang Chendong wouldn't make any decisions on behalf of the mercenaries. Instead, he said to Ru Zhu with a smile, "Eunuch Ru wants to go to the mercenaries' barracks to take a look. Marquis naturally welcomes you. However, I can't make the decision on their side. If something unpleasant happens, I hope that Eunuch Ru won't be angry." Hearing that Yang Chendong allowed it, Ru Zhu's face was immediately filled with joy. As long as this person didn't obstruct him, he was confident that he could make friends with the mercenaries. After all, the other party came to make money. Whose money wasn't money? He had the emperor as his backing and the national treasury's silver as his backing. As long as he was willing to spend money, he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't be able to convince the mercenaries. As if afraid that Yang Chendong would go back on his word, Ru Zhu hurriedly said, "No problem, no problem. When the time comes, just introduce me to them. As for the other matters, I'll take care of them." "Good. Then prepare the silver and set out." Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. "Good, good." Ru Zhu hurriedly agreed. Then he turned to Lu Gue and said, "Commander, I'll have to trouble you to send some people to escort 500,000 taels of silver from the national treasury to the mercenaries' compound." "Thank you for your trouble." Ru Zhu and Lu Gue were both Eunuch Jin's trusted aides. Their positions were also very close, so it was natural for them to be polite. To this, Lu Gue also politely replied, "It's my duty, it's my duty. I'll arrange for people to do it right away." The morning's questioning finally had a result. In the end, it ended with the imperial power backing down. Of course, to the outside world, this was the embroidered uniform guards backing down, not the emperor backing down. The 100 embroidered uniform guards pushed out 10 large carriages. In each carriage, there were 10 large chests. A total of 500,000 taels of silver headed straight for the mercenaries' barracks. As if afraid that Yang Chendong would do something bad, when Lu Gue went to arrange for people to go to the national treasury to get the silver, Ru Zhu accompanied him the entire time. He really didn't leave his side and didn't give him any space or time to spread the news. However, what Ru Zhu didn't know was that when Yang Chendong faced him, he stood with his hands behind his back. The hands behind his back were constantly making gestures to convey what he wanted to say. All of this was clearly seen by Tiger's Mane, who was standing behind him as a servant. After understanding what the young master wanted to say, he quietly left. Ru Zhu didn't care about this at all. He only wanted to keep an eye on Yang Chendong so that he didn't spread the news, especially not to the mercenaries. Other people and matters were not within his scope of concern. Just like this, Ru Zhu accompanied Yang Chendong until the silver was prepared. Only then did Ru Zhu happily ask the loyal Marquis to accompany him to the mercenaries' courtyard. Yang Chendong gladly agreed, and the group left the embroidered uniform guards' yamen in a grandiose manner. Along the way, this group quickly attracted the attention of the common people they encountered. Spies from the Bureau of Security had already been planted in the crowd. With their intentional spread, the news that the embroidered uniform guard was looking for trouble with the mercenaries protecting the capital quickly spread. Many common people began to reprimand the embroidered uniform guard, and the balance of public opinion began to tilt in favor of the mercenaries. Leading public opinion for one's own use had not been noticed at the time, but Yang Chendong knew that in many cases, obtaining the support of the common people was already half the battle. Of course, there was no need for him to explain these things that would later be regarded as the truth to others. There was a wide road in front of the mercenaries' courtyard. He had only chosen this place because he had considered the problem of gathering an army. When Yang Chendong and Ru Zhu arrived, it naturally didn't feel crowded at all. This place is not bad. Loyal Marquis is quite considerate. Ru Zhu seemed intent on getting close to Yang Chendong, and he would only be satisfied with a few words of praise for this courtyard. Regarding this, Yang Chendong only smiled without saying anything. He naturally knew what the other party was thinking. If it weren't for the fact that he was still useful, the other party would have already coldly glared at him and even tried to make trouble for him. For this eunuch who had no emotions and only cared about profit and power, Yang Chendong was already giving him a lot of face by showing him some courtesy. As for any words of thanks or praise, that was simply out of the question. Since the cold vanguard had already entered the capital, no one would be able to make things difficult for him in the future. This was a display of his confidence. Yang Chendong's nonchalant attitude and silent smile along the way was seen by Ru Zhu, and in exchange, he sneered coldly in his heart. He had already decided that once he got involved with the mercenaries, the loyal Marquis would just go wherever he wanted to go. Even eunuchs would look down on nobles who relied on the power of others. At the entrance of the courtyard, 4 cold vanguard soldiers stood at attention. They held a black and cold 95 style in their hands, and the gleaming bayonets on the body of the spear gave off an intimidating aura. How mighty! Ru Zhu praised sincerely after seeing the might of the 4 mercenaries from afar. As they spoke, the group arrived at the entrance of the courtyard. 4 gleaming bayonets were placed horizontally in front of everyone. This is an important military area. Unrelated people are not allowed to disturb us. Please leave quickly, or else bear the consequences. The 4 cold vanguard soldiers didn't show the slightest hint of fear despite the size of the group. On the contrary, they even took the initiative to speak. Chapter 193. Yang Chendong stood in the middle of the crowd and watched all of this with an indifferent expression. He had no intention of walking out. He had not come into contact with the cold front for a long time. He also wanted to see the mental state of this troop from the side. Ru Zhu stood in the front row of the crowd. Especially when he was about to reach the entrance of the courtyard, he intentionally quickened his pace. His intention to seize the opportunity was very obvious. Yang Chendong was happy to see this happen. That was because he knew that the cold front would not treat Ru Zhu well just because of some silver. If they really did that, it would be equivalent to being expelled from the cold front. Only with iron discipline would an iron army appear. Yang Chendong was very confident in this point. However, some people did not know about this. After seeing that the front was blocked, Ru Zhu took the initiative to walk out. He then put on a smile on his face and bowed respectfully as he said, "Brothers, please allow me to report. I am a supervising eunuch of the great Ming's Imperial Horse Directorate. This time, I am here to deliver the silver. Do you think you can let us pass? Step back. If you take half a step forward, you will be killed without mercy." In response to Ru Zhu's attempt to curry favor with him, the platoon leader of the cold front, who was standing guard at the entrance, had a serious expression on his face. At the same time, he pulled the bolt of the 95 style gun in his hand, and a murderous aura spread out in all directions. In the past, Ru Zhu was only an internal envoy. When had he ever seen such a scene? He was immediately frightened and involuntarily stepped back. His mouth trembled as he said, "This eunuch is really here to deliver the silver. If you don't believe me, you can call your general out to verify my authenticity. Who is making a racket outside the courtyard? Do you know that this is a military area? Unrelated people are not allowed to come near." A shout came from inside the gate. Then, the sound of orderly footsteps could be heard. Soon after, a dozen or so cold front soldiers, led by Ting Shan, walked out of the courtyard. As soon as these people appeared, they raised the 95 style and held it in their hands. Then, they coldly stared at the great Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guards outside the door with hawk-like eyes. It was as if they were ready to fight if they didn't get along. The embroidered uniform guards were considered ferocious. Who knew how many people were bullied by them? From commoners to merchants, to officials and nobles, who wouldn't tremble when they saw them, afraid that they would be remembered? This also made them feel superior to others. But for some reason, the moment he saw Long Feng, a chill rushed out from the soles of his feet. It felt as if he was being targeted by a ferocious tiger and could become a piece of meat in its stomach at any moment. Some of the more timid embroidered uniform guards didn't even know where to put their hands and feet. They just lowered their heads and didn't say a word. Ru Zhu also felt a chill spreading from his head to his feet. He did not know that this was because Tang Shan and the others had killed too many people on Little Ryukyu Island. However, no matter how scared he was, since he received the imperial order, he always wanted to complete the mission. After he raised his head and saw Tang Shan's murderous aura, he immediately lowered his head. Then, He tried to use a negotiating tone and said, "General, I am a supervising eunuch of the great Ming's Imperial Horse Directorate. This time, I am here on the orders of our emperor to deliver silver to you." Deliver silver? Hearing Ru Zhu's words, Tang Shan's murderous aura seemed to have cooled down a lot. Sensing that the other party's tone seemed to have loosened, Ru Zhu thought to himself that silver was indeed the most useful thing. He immediately said, "Yes, yes, we are here to deliver silver to you. However, how should I address you, General? Are you the highest-ranking leader here?" "This battalion commander isn't the highest-ranking leader? What? Are you looking down on this battalion commander's low position?" Tang Shan looked at Ru Zhu with an ice-cold gaze. His murderous aura reappeared. Ru Zhu only asked about the other party's identity and position because he wanted to get to know the other party's higher-ups in the shortest time possible and establish a good relationship with them. He really didn't have any other intentions. However, after being reminded by Tang Shan and thinking about his previous behavior, he seemed to be a little too impatient. For a moment, Ru Zhu regretted his impatient actions. He opened his mouth and said, "No, no, this general misunderstood. This eunuch didn't mean that." "Humph. Leave your money and get out of here." Tang Shan had no intention of listening to Ru Zhu's explanation. He seemed to have been angered by Ru Zhu's words. At this moment, he waved his hand and looked like he was going to chase them away. "Leave your silver and scram." This was completely different from what Ru Zhu had imagined. For a moment, he couldn't accept it. "General, shouldn't you call your leader over and discuss this?" Bang, 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 bang. A series of gunshots rang out, and the tiles on the roof of the house opposite the courtyard were broken into countless pieces. Then, the tiles fell from above, raising waves of dust. Tang Shan opened fire. This was how he answered Ru Zhu's question. Facts speak louder than words. After a series of gunshots, all the brocade-gowned guards present were stunned on the spot. Then, someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Next, the brocade-gowned guards gave up on their carriages and retreated in large strides. Ru Zhu was also in the crowd. In fact, his speed of retreat was not slower than anyone else. It had to be said that in the face of life-threatening danger, even a eunuch's reaction could be surprisingly fast. Everyone was retreating. Soon, Yang Chendong, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Qiu Vi of the first guard who had been standing in the crowd appeared. Initially, when Tang Shan saw that some people did not retreat, he revealed a trace of anger. He wanted to teach them a lesson for ignoring his cold front. However, when the crowd retreated and Yang Chendong stood at the very front, Tang Shan, who originally had a ferocious look on his face and looked like he would attack at any moment, immediately turned into astonishment, followed by excitement and agitation. His originally straight and strong legs now looked like they were about to bend and kneel on the ground. The earliest cold front was personally trained by Yang Chendong. Even Long Feng, who was in his later years, had only heard legends about the sixth young master. It could be said that in the most elite of the cold front, if there was only one person who could not be disrespected, and who everyone respected and had to give a thumbs up to, it would be Yang Chendong. Even Commander Long Song of the army, although he also had the word Long in his name, he only wore the army's Long Feng uniform. It was more like in the Navy, Commander Gao Xiong's uniform. However, with only Yang Chendong, no matter if it was the Army, the Navy, or even the Air Force who were practicing hot air balloons, they all respected him. He had a godlike reputation. When Tang Shan saw him, how could he not want to kneel on the ground? Cough. With a soft cough, Yang Chendong could tell what Tang Shan was going to do and what kind of performance he was going to show. He immediately reminded him. Although the cough was not loud, it shocked Tang Shan like a sudden clap of thunder. When he saw Commander Ru and a group of Imperial guards looking at him from the corner of his eyes, he finally remembered where he was and what kind of situation he was in. Tang Shan forcefully put away his thoughts of kneeling and bowing to Yang Chendong. Then, he made a gesture of inviting him in. Following Tang Shan's action, all the cold front soldiers standing on both sides of him straightened their bodies as if they were soldiers waiting for the king to inspect them. Some of these cold front soldiers were personally trained by Yang Chendong. Some of their military ranks were taught by the sixth young master, and some of them did not know Yang Chendong. However, this did not stop them from expressing their respect for the young master. He really wanted to say something to these brothers, even if it was just to pat them on the shoulder and give them some encouragement. However, Yang Chendong knew that this was not the time to do this. If he appeared too close to the mercenaries, it would be hard to avoid suspicion. This would not be beneficial to his next plan. With his back facing Commander Ru and the others, Yang Chendong could only smile at these cold front soldiers. However, this smile was like the sun in the cold winter, making these brothers feel a warmth from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, their hearts were beating rapidly. This was the godlike sixth young master, and he was smiling at them? With this experience, they would be able to brag about it for a while when they returned to Crimson City. Tung Shan also suppressed the excitement in his heart. After Yang Chendong stepped into the courtyard, he quickly followed him. At this moment, a large group of people had already knelt down in the courtyard. The leaders were Commander Longsong and Battalion Commander Wu Sheng. "Welcome, sixth young master." The voice was low, but it was more like the ray of sunlight before dawn, ready to explode with powerful energy at any time. "Brothers, thank you for your hard work." Facing close to 300 cold front soldiers, Yang Chendong was also very excited. In his eyes, these were his children. They were created by him, and they were also his pride. The words "thank you for your hard work" caused many cold front soldiers who would not even blink in the face of death to cry. Perhaps to them, these were the words they had been waiting for. Yang Chendong was also very excited in his heart. At this time, he felt as if he had returned to the barracks of his previous life, and saw those outstanding soldiers he had brought with him. This made him unable to calm down. However, Yang Chendong, who had lived 2 lives, knew what he wanted to protect, what he pursued, and what his dreams were. In order to achieve this final goal, he could not do whatever he wanted at this moment. Hence, he suppressed the excitement in his heart and walked in front of Lung Song. He patted his shoulder and said, "Not bad, you're more sturdy than before." "Thank you, sixth young master, for your praise." Lung Song, who did not like to smile and always had a stern face in the eyes of the soldiers, actually smiled at this moment. His smile was so carefree, so natural, and so sincere. Chapter 194. He walked up to Ting Shan, who had just returned to his unit, and lightly nodded. Extending a hand, he smoothed out Tang Shan's uniform. "Very good. You're much more spirited than before." "Thank you, sixth young master, for your praise," Ting Shan replied in a low voice, suppressing his excitement. Taking another step forward, Yang Chendong arrived in front of Wu Sheng. Extending his right hand, he formed a fist and punched Wu Sheng's chest. "Very good. I heard that you've worked very hard. Now that you're a battalion commander, keep it up." Wu Sheng did not complain after being punched. On the contrary, he excitedly called out, "Sixth young master, please be at ease. Wu Sheng will definitely perform even better and strive to become regimental commander as soon as possible, surpassing regiment commander Longsong and becoming his commanding officer." This cry immediately drew laughter from the other members of the Cold Front. One by one, it took him a full hour to greet each of his brothers. He could still call out the names of some of them, but he didn't recognize some of them. However, this didn't stop them from quickly becoming friends and brothers. Lung Song, Tung Shan, and Wu Sheng followed at Yang Chendong's side, introducing each of their unfamiliar brothers to him, recounting the contributions they had made, the areas in which they had excelled, and their individual characteristics. In this hour, Yang Chendong had gained a deeper understanding of the 300 Cold Front members. At this moment, the 500,000 taels of silver had been carried into the courtyard. Even the Cold Front members who had been guarding the gate had entered the courtyard to greet the sixth young master. "Very good. Your performance has greatly pleased this young master. You truly live up to the name of the Cold Front." Once everyone stood in line in front of Yang Chendong, the founder of the Cold Front began to speak. The Cold Front is like the cold edge of a weapon, but it has a purpose, and it is unyielding, unstoppable, and invincible. Today, you were able to stand out from the rest of the Cold Front and come to the capital, come to this young master's side. This is even more proof of your excellence, that you are outstanding members of the Cold Front. For this reason, This young master is proud of you." After a round of encouragement, Yang Chendong sensed that the morale of the cold front soldiers had risen to an unprecedented level. Yang Chendong's face, which was originally full of smiles, suddenly changed and became much more serious. "I don't care what kind of glorious past you have and what kind of outstanding performance you have. But now, this young master hopes that you can forget everything about the past and face the reality before you again. That is, you will be fighting against 10, 100, or even 1,000 people by yourself. I wonder if you can do it?" "Yes." With a low growl, the veins on the necks of the cold front members tightened, as if they would burst at any moment. This was their way of expressing their desire for victory and their confidence in themselves. "Very good. Now, I give the order for those who should rest to rest. The 3 battalion commanders, come with me." Yang Chenong knew that tomorrow's battle would descend, so in order for the soldiers to face the enemy with full energy and vigor, he gave the order for them to rest. With the order to disperse, the 300 cold front members left in an orderly fashion. There was not the slightest bit of panic in the process. This was the performance of a true elite force. From this, one could see that the great effort Yang Chendong had put into training them in formation had been effective. Lung Song, Teng Shan, and Wu Sheng followed Yang Chendong to a secret room deep within the courtyard. Qiu Vi led a group of guards to search the place. After confirming that there was nothing suspicious or dangerous, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei flanked Yang Chendong on either side. It wasn't that Yang Chendong didn't trust Lung Feng's team, but as a leader, he should have such an imposing manner. It was said that sometimes distance makes the heart grow fonder. Between a superior and a subordinate, there should be enough distance. Otherwise, if the relationship was too close, there would be a lack of mystery. Naturally, when he wanted to lead them, the words he said would be somewhat discounted. Tiger's Mane and the others' actions were seen by Lung Song and the other 2. If it were anyone else who dared to treat them like this, they would have been furious and would have even taken out their weapons to fight. However, this was allowed by the 6th young master, so they did not dare to show the slightest displeasure or displeasure. Speaking of which, all of this was thanks to Wan Shaoqian, Mo Qingyu, and the other political instructors. It was because of the existence of these political instructors that they constantly told the cold front members about the brilliance and greatness of the 6th young master. Gradually, everyone began to view Yang Chendong as a god. Because of this, who would dare to disobey his orders? Not to mention disobeying anything. If anyone dared to say anything bad about the 6th young master, who knew how many people would put that person to death in an instant? At this point, even Long Song, the only regiment commander in the army, did not dare to have any other thoughts or actions. Perhaps a regiment commander's position was already very high, and could be said to be the true commander of the army. But if he dared to say that Yang Chendong was not good, he was afraid that even the brothers who had the best relationship with him would turn against him because of this. This was the power of political instructors. They were able to eliminate the possibility of betrayal from the cold front members. Yang Chendong sat at the head of the table. Tiger's Mane then spread out a map that he had already drawn on the table. Yang Chendong pointed at it and said, "Come and see." Outside the courtyard, looking at the closed door, Ru Zhu was not willing to leave like this. Thus, he did not leave. Instead, he stood on the street and waited. However, this wait lasted for more than 2 hours. Fortunately, there was an accompanying eunuch who got a wooden stool for him to sit on. Otherwise, he would not have been able to hold on. Why hasn't the loyal Marquis come out yet? Could it be that something has happened? One of the accompanying embroidered uniform guard Baihu saw that so much time had passed, but there was still no movement from the small courtyard. He could not help but ask suspiciously, "Don't speak nonsense." Ru Zhu's face stiffened, as if he was reprimanding him. However, in his heart, he was thinking that it would be best if something happened to Yang Chendong. If that was the case, the matter of communicating with the mercenaries would fall to him. At that time, he would be able to reap a lot of benefits. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Just as Ru Zhu was thinking about this, the door suddenly opened. Yang Chendong, dressed in green, walked out in large strides. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, Ru Zhu's eyes were fixed on him. He wanted to see if there would be any important figures from the mercenaries coming out to see him off. If that was the case, he could take the opportunity to say a few words and get familiar with them first. Unfortunately, only Yang Chendong and his servants came out. Not a single mercenary came out to see them off. This caused Ru Zhu's face to be filled with disappointment. However, what he did not know was that the disappointment was yet to come. After Yang Chendong walked out of the courtyard, he directly came to Ru Zhu and said with a serious expression, "Eunuch Ru, I have already tried my best to communicate with the mercenary generals. However, they did not agree to a eunuch being in charge of the army. They also said that since they have received the money, they naturally would not let the Walla army take the capital." After saying this, Yang Chendong shrugged his shoulders, looking as if he was powerless. Ru Zhu felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was frozen in place for who knew how long before he came back to his senses. At this time, Yang Chendong had already walked past him, heading in the direction of the immortal abode with his servants. "Wait a moment, Marquis Yang. What is going on here? The imperial supervisor has always been in the Great Ming dynasty. Why are they making an exception now? I don't think this will work," Ru Zhu said with a face full of unwillingness. He had already patted his chest in front of the emperor and Jining, saying that he would use the war as an opportunity to establish a good relationship with the mercenaries. He would also do his best to obtain a few new firearms, providing the best specimens for the Great Ming dynasty's development. But now, even his authority to supervise the army had been taken away. Didn't that mean that this wish could no longer be fulfilled? Yang Chendong stopped in his tracks when Ru Zhu called out to him. He suddenly turned around and said, "Eunuch Ru, you said that this is the law of the Great Ming dynasty, but these people do not belong to the Great Ming, so they do not need to follow it. Of course, if Eunuch Ru is not satisfied, you can ask them yourself. However, if you provoke their displeasure, then you will have to take responsibility for the consequences. Right. I must remind you that the vanguard cavalry of the Walla will arrive tomorrow. It would be best if nothing unexpected were to happen." As if it was a kind reminder, Yang Chendong turned around and left with a hearty laugh, leaving behind a stunned Ru Xing. He was filled with unwillingness and resentment. Of course, he wanted to do as Yang Chendong said and ask the mercenaries about the Great Ming dynasty's rules. However, after the embroidered uniform guard's reckless actions last night, he didn't dare to do that again. What if he really angered them and they demanded money again? He had already paid 500,000 taels. He had already lost face once. Was he going to lose face a second time? Ru Zhu let out a long sigh. He knew that he would not be able to complete the decree this time. He really didn't know that the emperor would be so furious after finding out about this. It seemed that he still needed to greet eunuch Jining and protect his current position first. As for forming a good relationship with the mercenaries, once the war started, it wouldn't end in a day or two. When the time came, an opportunity should appear. Putting aside the fact that Ru Zhu went to the palace to find Jining and reported what happened to the emperor, it caused Zhu Qiyu to be extremely angry. The news quickly spread in the city that the 10,000 elite vanguard cavalry of the Walla would arrive in the capital tomorrow. When the news came out, the entire city was terrified. Some people began to pack their bags and prepare to leave the capital. Some cowards who had nowhere else to go began to pray at home, hoping that the Great Ming dynasty's army could win a battle and defeat the wolves of the Walla. Chapter 195. The capital, which had just regained its peace due to the low price of rice, was once again bustling with activity. In the immortal abode, the girls were also affected. They all came over to ask Yang Chendong, who was practicing calligraphy, what was going on outside. Why was the commander still so calm when the battle was about to begin? Yang Chendong had unknowingly become obsessed with writing. In his last life, he had been running all over the place to complete missions. How could he possibly find the time to compose himself and write? Now that he finally had the time and opportunity, he naturally had to put in some effort. At the very least, when he inscribed words for someone in the future, they wouldn't look too bad. Sixth brother, sixth brother. A series of feminine voices came from outside the study. Yang Chendong, who was in the middle of writing, sighed softly. He knew that his plans to practice calligraphy today had been dashed. He only had 4 women, and it was already so lively. He really didn't know what it would be like with the addition of other women in the future. At this moment, Yang Chendong suddenly missed the old Yang clan residence in Janning Manor. Back then, he could really do whatever he wanted, and no one would bother him. While Yang Chendong was still reminiscing about the old days, Hu Yin and the other three girls ran in. As soon as they saw Yang Chendong still holding the pin, they immediately surrounded him, and for a while, they kept asking him questions. Yang Chendong couldn't tell who was asking what, but he had a rough idea of what was going on. The four women all wanted to know if they could defeat the Walla cavalry tomorrow. That was the cavalry that had defeated Ing Zong and Shi Hong. They were all worried for Yang Chendong. Well, your husband knows what you're worried about. How about this? Tomorrow, all of you will put on makeup and go to the battlefield with Lu Lang. What do you think? Yang Chendong suddenly raised his voice and said something that shocked the four women. Since ancient times, it had been an ironclad rule that men should fight on the battlefield and women should stay at home. Apart from Hua Mulan and the female generals of the Yang clan, very few women were allowed to fight on the battlefield. However, Yang Chendong just had to make this request. How could these women not be shocked? Lu Lang, are you okay? Can we go to the battlefield too? Hu Yan's face was filled with disbelief. At the same time, her face was flushed red. Obviously, this proposal had touched her nerves and made her begin to yearn for it. Of course, I've already prepared your clothes. I borrowed them from the mercenaries and put them in your room. Take them and see if they fit you. Yang Chendong's eyes were as clear as a spring, and his face was full of love. When the four women heard this, they immediately ignored Yang Chendong and walked towards their rooms. After a short while, the four girls in camouflage uniforms returned to Yang Chendong. They were also in camouflage uniforms. When the four women wore the custom-made camouflage uniforms, their graceful figures were immediately highlighted. They actually had such a temperament and were so different from the rest. Hu Yin and the other two women looked at each other and chattered nonstop. Only Xiao Yin, who knew the truth, kept smiling. She knew that these clothes were not borrowed at all. They had already arranged for the garment factory in Crimson City to make them according to the women's figures. At that time, the concept of men being superior to women was very serious. Even the few men who loved their wives would be called a lioness from Hudong. Sometimes, these men had to worry about other people's opinions and do some things that hurt women. Only Yang Chendong really doted on his women. When he did things, he did not care about other people's opinions and thoughts. While the women were satisfied with the military uniform, they were even more satisfied with Yang Chendong's attitude towards them. This was what made them happy. Seeing the four women slowly calm down from their excitement, Yang Chendong smiled and said, "These clothes are not for you to wear for free. There is a mission." There is a mission? What mission? When Hu Yin and the other two women heard that there was a mission, their breathing became a lot more rapid. They even wondered if Lu Lang really wanted them to go to the battlefield. But what could they do without the strength to truss a chicken? The four women looked at him suspiciously. Yang Chendong chuckled and said, "What are you thinking? How can I be willing to let you fight the enemy? Your task is to record the most wonderful scene on the battlefield, then go back and edit it into a program for more people to watch and completely spread the glorious image of Lu Lang." Yang Chendong said very arrogantly. Hu Yin and the other two women laughed. But after laughing, they felt deeply gratified. Since Lu Lang dared to let them walk around the battlefield, it was enough to show that he was full of confidence in this battle. In fact, this was the real reason why Yang Chendong wanted to take the women to the battlefield. If he wanted to make a program, he could have learned it from the soldiers who participated in the battle in the future. But he did not do that. Instead, he wanted to take them with him. He wanted to tell the women through this battle that the battlefield was not as dangerous as they imagined. At least on the battlefield with him, Yang Chendong, they could still be very relaxed. After tomorrow's battle, when Yang Chendong went out to lead troops to battle in the future, the women would not have to be so worried and afraid at home. The four girls left in high spirits. From the looks of it, it was clear that they were going to wear the new military uniforms and walk around the Yangjia village for everyone to see. They were going to receive some envious gazes. Yang Chendong stayed in the study, discussing something with Tiger's Man and Yang San about tomorrow's battle. Yang San, is your security bureau ready for tomorrow's battle? Looking at the actual leader of the security bureau, Yang Qindong's tone had a trace of concern and comfort. Young master, please rest assured that everything is ready. I promise not to let irrelevant people near the gate. Yang San replied respectfully and confidently. Very good. This battle must be fought with a sense of mystery. You all remember, as an opponent, the less they know about your methods, the more they will be afraid of you. What we need to do is to form and maintain this sense of mystery to the greatest extent, so that the opponent can't figure out what to do. After saying this to Yang San, he said to Tiger's man, tell butler Yang Nong to pay attention to the security situation of the Yang family village. Presumably, some people who can't find out about the mercenaries will have their eyes on the Yang family village. These few days, young master, I have to deal with the Walla army, so I don't have time to deal with the matters of the village. I will leave Dao Zhao's second guard team to protect the village. Yes, young master, I will inform Captain Dao Xiao in a while. However, I think that he will not be happy if he is not allowed to participate in the battle and is instead staying in the village. Tiger's man chuckled. Dao Xiao would definitely feel very wronged if he was not allowed to participate in the battle. Thinking back to the Battle of the Tuma Castle, they did not go and instead stayed. Now that they were being asked to stay, it would be strange if they were happy. Yang Qindong smiled at this. Tell Dao Xiao that the division of tasks is different, but they are all equally important. Tell him not to be arrogant and impatient. In the future, the young master will have a lot of things to do, so there is no need to worry that they will not have a chance to participate in the battle. Yang Qindong was preparing for tomorrow's battle, and he was full of confidence. This was his first real battle in this world, so of course he had to make an exciting appearance. In comparison, there was another army that was also full of confidence heading towards the capital. They were Walla's 10,000 vanguard cavalry. The Battle of Timu Fortress was a great victory, and it was unknown how many Ming dynasty officials were killed. If it were not for Yang Qindong's intervention, perhaps even Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen would have been killed or captured. This battle also made Walla's appetite grow. Especially after Xining defected to the enemy, she revealed many things about the Ming dynasty, including many secrets of the imperial court and the imperial palace. According to what Xining said, the Ming dynasty's civil and military officials were not on the same side. They were very hostile and would often crush each other. For example, the Battle of the Tumu Castle was a conspiracy by the civil officials against the military officials in order to severely injure them. In this battle, didn't a general like Zhang Fu die on the battlefield? However, in reality, it was true that the civil and military officials were at odds with each other. However, in the Battle of the Tumu Castle, many generals died, so how much better were the civil officials? Again, if not for Yang Qindong's intervention, at least 2 ministers would have died on the battlefield. It didn't seem worth it to use such a heavy capital to design a plan. However, Walla didn't know this. They won the battle and thought that Xining was right. Even when they were fighting against Shi Hong, it was Xining who came up with the idea. First, they pretended to be weak and then baited the enemy step by step. In the end, they defeated the enemy. Because of this, Xining became a good friend of Walla's people. Sai Bianwang, who was in charge of leading the vanguard, was leading the army to the capital of the great Ming dynasty. At the same time, he was asking Xining if there were any powerful generals in the great Ming dynasty that could fight against him. Xining had thought about this question many times in his mind. He had thought of almost all of the courtiers and confirmed that there were still generals who could lead troops, but he could not think of anyone who could truly command an army. General, in the Battle of the Tumu Castle, the Ming dynasty's military officials were all killed. There is no one left who can fight against our Walla's army. In addition, Yingzong went to Nanjing to rebuild the imperial court. The Ming dynasty, which was divided into 2, has nothing to fear. Oh, ha ha ha, doesn't that mean that the Ming dynasty's capital is at our fingertips? The wealth and women there will all belong to our Walla? Ha ha ha. Xining laughed wildly. He was imagining beautiful women in his arms, delicious food in his mouth, and piles of gold and silver. Xining looked down on the Xining who only thought about wealth and women. A person who was too greedy couldn't achieve anything great. General, now that the Ming dynasty's army is empty and weak, what we should do now is to lead the army into the capital and then go all the way south until we occupy the entire Ming dynasty. Chapter 196. Yes, yes, Brother Ning is right. But this matter still requires Big Brother Yeshin's decision. I think it's better to enter the capital first. The competition king chuckled. On the surface, he seemed to believe Ning's suggestion, but in reality, he was short-sighted and had limited knowledge. It would be difficult for him to achieve anything great. Seeing this clearly, Ning simply didn't say anything more. Once the capital was truly conquered, leader Yeshin would probably arrive soon. At that time, it wouldn't be too late to make a suggestion. At this time, both Sagan Wang and Ning treated the capital of the great Ming dynasty as their own backyard. In their view, wherever the army arrived, the enemy would definitely surrender. But they did not know that Yang Chendong had been waiting for them for a long time. Another day, the sun slowly rose from the east. With the arrival of a new day, the capital was extremely quiet. Because of the fear of war, those who could leave had basically left. Those who stayed behind were those who didn't want to leave for various reasons. In Yang Chendong's words, those who stayed behind had a stable mentality. Even if the war started, they wouldn't easily cause trouble. With no one causing trouble in the capital, Yang Chendong had less to worry about, and he could focus on fighting the Tile army. Although he had the Yangtze's new army and the world's most advanced firearms, he still had too few people. Including the 100 cold vanguards led by Xiao Feng, they only had 400 people. Facing an enemy dozens of times their number, they couldn't be careless. War had always been a very serious matter, and it was also the easiest thing to change. A careless mistake, or a problem in a link could directly change the outcome. Of course, Yang Chendong was still very confident in the Yangtze's new army's cold vanguards. They were forbidden from doing anything, so there wouldn't be any problems. What he was worried about was the 10,000 city defense army that the emperor had given him, including the 5,500 soldiers from the warden's office. These people were used to running amok in the city. Bullying ordinary people was not a problem, but when faced with the elite Walla cavalry, it was hard to say what the result would be. Even when they were fighting in a favorable battle, it was doubtful whether they could achieve complete victory. Thus, early in the morning, Yang Chendong had called over the 5 commanders and led them to the north gate of the capital, the Dashing Gate, to stand on the gate tower. Along with the 5 commanders, there was a general called Yang Guang. He was originally the deputy commander. When Shi Hong, the commander, lost the battle and disappeared, he naturally became extremely important. Yang Guang was quite capable. More importantly, he had a good attitude. When he saw Yang Chendong, he would call him Marquis, then Marquis. He felt very close. Under his lead, Sun Tong and the other commanders also changed from calling him Yang Ho to Marquis. Standing in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the other 5 commanders, Yang Chendong pointed behind him, which was the empty space outside Dashing Gate. Before long, the Walla cavalry will appear here. A big battle is unavoidable. Everyone, are you afraid? Yang Chendong's tone was very calm, even cold. It was as if the appearance of the enemy was like a story, unable to stir up any waves in his heart. In comparison, the 6 commanders' expressions were not as good. Yang Guang and Sun Tong were still in a better state. At least they could still stand up straight. Tao Jin, Yang Jie, Gao Li, and Mao Fushou, the 4 commanders' faces were obviously much uglier. If one looked carefully, their legs were trembling. In this month, the morning in the capital was not hot, but it was far from cold. However, the 4 of them were so nervous that they broke out in cold sweat. This was enough to show the fear in their hearts. Forget it, the 4 of you will follow what we said before. Each of you will lead 200 soldiers to maintain order in the city. But remember, before the enemy enters the city, there cannot be chaos in the capital. Otherwise, if there is a problem, the person who will be punished will be punished. Yang Chendong did not want Hao Jin and the other 3 to stay. Their presence was not only a good thing for the morale of the soldiers, it could also lead the other soldiers astray and make them feel afraid. Hearing that they did not have to face the Walla cavalry, Tao Jin and the other 3 heaved a sigh of relief. They clasped their fists and bowed to Yang Chendong before retreating from the tower. Only Yang Guang and Sun Tong were left. Yang Chendong said, "Vice Commander Yang, you are in charge of leading 5,000 cavalry to remain under the Dashing Gate. When the time comes, when I give the order, Lead the army out of the city in pursuit. Remember, without Marquis's order, you are not to attack. Also, when you leave the city, do not go too far. 10 li is the limit. If you exceed this distance, immediately retreat. Do you understand? Yang Guang, who was called out, was confused. From Yang Qindong's words, he was leading the cavalry out to chase after the enemy. Did he not need to fight a battle? If he did not fight, how could he be sure that the enemy would escape? If they did not escape, how could they chase after them? But while he was confused, military orders were like mountains. Yang Qindong was the commanding general personally appointed by Zhu Qiyu. Since there was a military order, he only needed to follow it. Yes, please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely act according to your orders. After saying this, Yang Guang clasped his fists and left to make preparations. 5,000 strong horses. This was a number that had been gathered after searching the city for a long time. It was also one of the strongest forces in the capital that everyone could see. Yang Guang also left, leaving behind Sun Tong, the commanding general, standing there with his chest puffed out and his head raised. He also had an imposing aura. In history, Sun Tong had chosen to rely on Jining. He had a glorious time, but in the end, his ending was very tragic. After understanding this part of history from the book, Yang Qindong realized that this person still had some ability. As long as he was guided well, he would become a good general. Thus, he intended to train him and keep him by his side. Commander Sun, I'll leave the remaining 4,000 people in the warden's office to you. They are all placed above the Dashing Gate. You have to give people the impression that there are soldiers everywhere. Can you do it? Facing Sun Tong, Yang Qindong gave him his task. Please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely do a good job, Sun Tong replied in a loud voice, but in reality, he was already very confused. What did the loyal Marquis mean? Was he only leading soldiers to guard the city gates? Did he not need to send people to meet the enemy outside the city? It seemed that he was going to passively defend the city, but he didn't know if he would be able to do so. Sun Tong went to make arrangements, his mind filled with confusion. Just as he was wondering if he would have to rely on the city gate towers to stop Walla's army, a new order came down that left him completely confused. He didn't understand what Yang Qindong wanted to do. The new mission was to close all the gates of the capital except for the Dashing Gate. The only one that wasn't closed, the Dashing Gate, had to be left wide open so that people could walk straight in. He didn't understand why the gates had to be opened. Wouldn't this be allowing Walla's army to enter? It had to be known that cavalry was most proficient in land attacks. If they defended the city gates, they might have a chance of winning. But if they opened the gates and let the people in, wouldn't that mean that they were giving up their advantage? This would only increase the difficulty of defending the city. Sun Tong, who couldn't understand, arranged for people to follow Yang Qindong's orders while ordering his trusted aide to inform eunuch Jin Ying in the palace. The wheels of history were so similar. In his previous life, he had relied on Jin Ying, and in this life, he was going to follow the same trend. In the palace, all the officials were summoned to the court. Compared to the usual court meetings, all the officials had lost the mood to submit memorials today. Zhu Qiyu sat on the dragon throne, but no matter how big the dragon throne was, it didn't seem to be able to calm him down. As if he was on pins and needles, he would move his butt from time to time, vividly displaying his anxiety. In reality, he couldn't help but worry. If the capital fell, it would be the end of his reign as emperor. He would become the second emperor after Zhu Qiyu to be defeated by Wala, becoming a disgrace in the history of the great Ming dynasty. Whether he would become a lofty emperor, a prisoner, or even a dead man all depended on how this battle to defend the capital was fought. Unlike in history, Yu Qian, the assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel, was no longer present. Under Yang Qindong's guidance, they did not engage in battle with Walla's army on the outskirts. After Shi Heng's defeat, all the pressure was focused on the Victory Gate. That place would decide the final outcome of this battle. Reporting. Just as Zhu Qiyu's face was still filled with apprehension, the soldiers sent by Sun Pao arrived outside the throne room. Enter the hall. Jin Ying, who was standing next to Zhu Qiyu, was also concerned about the outcome of this battle. This time, he didn't wait for the emperor to agree before shouting out orders. At this moment of life and death, No one was thinking about whether Jining had overstepped her authority. Everyone was thinking about whether there would be a result in front of them. Was it a victory, or had they lost? The soldier was allowed to enter, so he lowered his head and walked into the hall. Soon after, he dropped to his knees and loudly reported, "Marquis of Loyalty has ordered the Victory Gate to be opened. Deputy Commander Yang Guang has led 5,000 cavalry to lie in wait within the city. Commander Sun Tong has led 4,000 some soldiers to guard the gate tower of the Victory Gate." What? As the soldier finished explaining the situation at the gate, the imperial court instantly grew rowdy. How could they possibly open the gate? The Walla cavalry are most skilled in charging formations. The tall walls are our only support. Abandoning the gate tower to defend is simply avoiding our advantage. Minister of War, Ming loudly proclaimed in order to show off his erudition. That's right, that's right. Marquis of Loyalty's actions are truly inappropriate. Inappropriate, the other officials began to jeer. Enough. The Minister of Rights, Hu Chong, was so angry that his lips trembled as he roared when he saw that the imperial court had turned into a pot of porridge. They were actually acting like commoners on the street. Chapter 197. With this roar, all the officials focused their gazes on him. You are all important officials of the court, yet you are throwing yourselves into chaos like commoners. Where is your decency? Hu Shao raised his beard and loudly questioned the officials. In terms of age and experience, Hu Kuang had sufficient qualifications. With this shout, many of the officials lowered their heads, not daring to argue with him. But there were also those who did not fear Hu Shao, such as the Minister of War, Ming, who stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet. Minister Hu, could it be that just because Yang Chendong is your grandson-in-law, you are protecting him like this? The Minister of Works, Shi Pu, also stepped forward and said, Minister Hu, now is not the time to be thinking about family ties. That's right. When the country is in danger, we should consider the big picture and put family ties aside. The new Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, also stepped forward and criticized Hu Shao. After attending court for so many years, Hu Shao had rarely been attacked by 3 ministers at once. But in the face of this situation, he had no intention of backing down. Instead, he looked at the 3 of them and said with disdain, "Oh, so the 3 of you should know how to fight, right? If that's the case, why didn't you step forward to shoulder the heavy burden when His Majesty was selecting great generals?" The Minister of War, Ming, blushed at Hu Zhao's words. He knew that he was the one who should step forward to shoulder the burden, but he did not have the confidence to do so. Now that Hu Shao had said this, he was clearly attacking him. Minister Hu, we are talking about the matter of the Victory Gate opening without attacking. Please don't change the topic, okay? Could it be that Yang Chendong has already surrendered to the Walla, and as his grandfather, you will also benefit from it? Is that why you are speaking up for him? Ming's attack touched on what everyone was most worried about. For a moment, the expressions of many officials changed. Even Zhu Qiyu, who sat on the dragon throne, turned ghastly pale. If what Minister Ming said was true, then wasn't he handing the capital over to the enemy? Minister please conduct yourself with dignity. Seeing that the emperor and all the ministers were moved by Ming's words, Hu Shao roared with a face full of anger. Does Minister have any evidence for what he said? Evidence? Of course not. But why is the city gate open? Ming couldn't help but gloat when he saw Hu Shao getting angry. Originally, he wasn't even a third-rank official, but because of Zhu Qiyu's appreciation, he was given the position of Minister of War and became a second-rank official of the Great Ming dynasty. But even so, he knew that some of the more experienced old officials still didn't like him. Now, he could say that minister who was speechless. In the future, no one would dare to look down on him in court. Hu Shao was an old official of several dynasties and had seen many storms. How could he be stumped by a new noble, Ming? Hearing that the other party had no evidence, he couldn't help but sneer and ask, since there is no evidence, Darren's words just now are suspected of framing. The contempt in Hu Zhao's eyes was very obvious when he didn't even call him minister and changed to lord. Ming's face immediately turned ugly when he heard Hu Zhao's words. But before he could think of a counterattack, Hu Shao continued, during this period of time, who doesn't know that the loyal marquis has bought a lot of property in the capital? Let me ask you, if he didn't have absolute confidence in defending the capital, why would he do this? This might be because he wants to calm the people. Besides, if he has already colluded with Walla, I believe that when the foreign race enters the capital, they won't touch his property, right? Ming didn't know how to answer the question, so he simply gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a petty person. Haha, what a joke. This is simply your excessive conjecture. Presumably, the emperor and the officials already knew what kind of person Walla was. He was simply a group of insatiable people. Just think about it. How could they put away their greed for the sake of others when dealing with such a person? If the loyal marquis wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. Everyone, don't forget who saved Ingzong from Walla. If he wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. When Ingzong's name was mentioned, the ministers immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Yes, if Yang Chendong was really such a traitor, he didn't need to do that at all. This reason instantly convinced many people, including acting sect master Zhu Qiyu. The loyal marquis saved Ingzong's life, but he didn't go to Nanjing a while ago? I believe everyone can already understand his intentions. This time, he's withstanding a huge amount of pressure to fight against a strong enemy. If we still don't trust him, wouldn't it be too disappointing? Hu Chang spoke as if he was fighting for justice for Yang Chendong. In fact, he was also very optimistic about his grandson-in-law. With Hu Zhao's words, the originally excited ministers quickly calmed down. Even Emperor Zhu Qiyu was a lot more confident because of these words. He said in the court, "Yes, the loyal marquis is loyal to the great Ming. No one is allowed to say such words in the future. Now let us wait for the good news." Because of Hu Zhao's argument, the debate in the court was finally suppressed. Yang Chendong, who was still unaware of this, was standing on the tower of the Victory Gate at this moment, looking into the distance. He didn't know that Hu Zhao had helped him block the attacks of the ministers, so he could lead the army in the front line at ease. Of course, even without Hu Zhao's help, Yang Chendong wouldn't hand over his military power at this time. It would just cause a lot of trouble. Standing on the tower, the moment he put down the binoculars, he said with a smile to the 4 delicate women in camouflage clothing standing beside him, "You can see now, the Walla cavalry is here." Are they here? Where are they? Where are they? Hu Zhao and the other women were very excited at this moment. They each held the binoculars hanging around their necks and looked into the distance. Sure enough, there was a burst of smoke and dust, and the Walla cavalry was here. With the competition king as the leader and Xi Ning as the guide, the 10,000 Walla cavalry were rapidly heading toward the capital of the great Ming dynasty. With so many people, looking from a distance, it was really a spectacular sight. Seeing that they were less than 15 li away from the capital, the fast horse scouts in the front line rushed back and reported that the Victory Gate in the capital was wide open. The gate is wide open? What does this mean? The competition king was somewhat at a loss when he heard this news. Logically speaking, if the great Ming army knew that he was coming, they would either defend the city to the death or flee like crazy. Why did they open the gate? This was inconsistent with the facts. Xi Ning was also confused by this news. He had not been in the capital for so long, so he did not know what had happened here. All he knew was that the great Ming dynasty had a situation where 2 emperors ruled together because of Zhu Qiyu's ascension. That was all. In Xi Ning's opinion, having 2 emperors ruling together was a good thing. When the power was divided, it gave the Walla army a chance to break through. But now that the gate of the capital was wide open, he could not figure it out. Before he could figure out what was going on, the competition king had already asked him, "Brother Xi Ning, why did the great Ming dynasty open the Victory Gate? Could it be that they want to surrender to us?" This, maybe. Xi Ning did not know the reason, so he naturally did not dare to talk nonsense. He could only follow the competition king's words. Xi Ning was just being polite. To put it bluntly, he did not have any ideas. But when the competition king heard his answer, he thought that he had guessed correctly. He was overjoyed and said, "Haha, as expected. The great Ming dynasty's army is just a scoundrel. When they know that our elite cavalry is coming, they must be panicking. In order to save their lives, it is possible that they will take the initiative to surrender." In this case, order the army to speed up and try to enter the capital for lunch at noon. Hearing the order, the Walla cavalry was overjoyed and eager to go. But only Xining felt that things were not so simple. However, he really could not think of a reason to do so, so he could only follow the army to the victory gate. "They are coming straight to us." On the city gate tower, Hu Yin jumped and said. Then she realized that her performance was a little rude, so she immediately walked to Yang Qindong's side with a red face. Haha. Seeing Hu Yin showing such a cute side, Yang Qindong laughed. He was more proud that the Walla army was coming to the victory gate according to his plan, which was what made him happy. There were only 10,000 city defense soldiers, and they were only a second-line army. Yang Qindong did not dare to have too much hope for them. But the capital of the Great Ming dynasty was really too big. There were as many as 12 gates that could enter the city. How to concentrate the troops and lure the enemy to attack was the first thing to consider. In order to achieve this goal, Yang Qindong ordered the other 11 gates to be closed, and only the victory gate was opened. Now, it seemed that he had successfully attracted the enemy's troops. It was only a distance of 15 li. In just a few moments, Vala's mighty cavalry appeared outside the victory gate. It was truly an army of more than 10,000 soldiers. Coupled with the fact that they were cavalry, it gave people a sense of grandeur. This kind of battle formation also scared Hu Yin and the other girls. Everything they knew about war was just from hearing about it. They had never seen it like this. For a moment, their bodies trembled because of nervousness. Yang Qindong had already noticed their changes. He walked forward and gave them a big hug. The warm hug quickly calmed them down. Then, the sixth young master Yang strode to the front of the city wall. He looked down and saw Xining and the others coming out of the cavalry. Chapter 198. It was originally Xining's idea to take the initiative to come out. In his eyes, the Great Ming dynasty was already finished. They would only have a bright future if they followed Walla. What he needed to do now was to perform well before everything was set in stone and gain more capital so that he could gain more benefits in the future. That was what he needed to do now. Therefore, when the army was 300 steps away from the gate, he took the initiative to ask to be the vanguard and talk to the Great Ming Empire's garrison to see if they could enter the city without shedding any blood. For Xining's request, the king of competition naturally agreed. When the two armies met, there was already danger. If someone wanted to take the initiative to volunteer, how could he not agree? Therefore, Xining came to the victory gate with 2 Walla cavalry soldiers who were protecting him. Xining, who was riding his horse, looked arrogant, but in fact, he was very careful. This could be seen from the fact that he stopped when he was 180 steps away from the gate. He still cherished his life. At that time, the most advanced long-range weapons were firearms and strong bows. However, the effective range of a strong bow was generally about 160 steps. It would lose its original power if it was further away. As for firearms, although they could shoot that far away, they would definitely lose their accuracy. It could be said that 180 steps was a safe distance. Which general is on the gate tower? Can you come out and meet me? I am the vanguard of the Walla army, Xining. As soon as he arrived at the victory gate, Xining's unpleasant voice, which sounded like a male duck's throat, rushed straight to the top of the gate tower. Yang Chengwang was still dressed in cyan. After Xining shouted, Yang Chengwang walked to the gate tower unhurriedly and exposed his body completely. He looked down at Xining and cupped his fists. It turns out to be eunuch Shi. I've been waiting here for a long time. The one who came out was actually Yang Qindong. Xining narrowed his eyes and looked up. Suddenly, a burst of anger rose from the bottom of his heart. His younger brother, Shi Sheng, once had a conflict with Yang Qindong. Not long after that, his younger brother died while performing a mission. Although the report at that time said that his younger brother died because of excessive indulgence in sex with a prostitute called Sai Tianxian, he was unwilling to believe this fact. Shi Sheng could be said to be a veteran in the field of flowers. How could he make such a low-level mistake? His instincts told him that there was something fishy about this matter, and it was very likely that he had been harmed by his enemies. However, because her younger brother and she had offended too many people, it was not easy to find a target. However, he still secretly investigated. Before the results were out, Ing Zong, Zhu Qizhen, had already sent him to the battlefield, which led to the current situation. Back then, Yang Chendong was one of the people he suspected. Now that he suddenly saw this person reveal himself, how could he remain calm? At that moment, he coldly snorted and said, "I really can't believe it. Is there no one else in the great Ming dynasty? How could they let a brat greet the Walla's army?" Shi Ning's words clearly implied something, and also expressed her strong dissatisfaction with Yang Chendong. He said that the sixth young master Yang was too young to take on such a big responsibility. As soon as these words came out, Tiger's Mane and the others, as well as Hu Yin and the other girls, were immediately dissatisfied. As the person involved, Yang Chendong was not angry at this time. On the contrary, he said with a smile, "Duke Shi, you flatter me. As the saying goes, the kind of person you are dealing with depends on the kind of person you are dealing with. Just like the Walla who doesn't know what's good for him and doesn't know how to repay kindness, the great Ming dynasty can send the young marquis to deal with him." Hu Yin and the other women covered their mouths and chuckled at his counterattack. First, Shi Ning looked down on Yang Chendong, and then she was ridiculed. It was because the Walla was weak that the great Ming dynasty sent the young Marquis of Loyalty to greet him. The meaning was that the great Ming dynasty would send the kind of person you are. This is called equality. If you look down on Yang Chendong, then you are actually looking down on yourself. This was clearly Yang Chendong giving her a taste of her own medicine. Hu Yin and the other girls, who had long known that Lu Lang's words were powerful, how could they not feel sad for Shi Ning at this moment? There were not many people in the world who could win against their husband in a war of words. On the city tower, Yang Chendong's words of sarcasm and even abuse made Shi Ning's face turn red and her eyes widen. But before she could make any counterattack, Yang Chendong continued, "Your body, hair, and skin are from your parents. You don't dare to destroy the beginning of filial piety. If you castrate yourself, how will you have the face to see your parents and relatives when you go to the underworld? This is unfilial. Loyal to the country, you have received the kindness of the great Ming dynasty. You should be a person of the great Ming dynasty. Even if you die, you will be a ghost of the great Ming dynasty. However, in order to survive, you ran to the enemy. This is a cruel and unscrupulous act. This is disloyal. You bully the common people and are greedy. Your parents and family were once common people. Once you gained power, you bullied the weak. This is unbenevolent. For your own selfishness, you actually danced with the wolves and wanted to lead the war to the great Ming dynasty, making the common people homeless and living in misery. This is unrighteous. You are disloyal, unfilial, heartless, and unrighteous people. I don't know how you have the face to live in this world." After a series of hearty and incessant curses, Shi Ning's face became more and more unsightly. She felt as if the blood in her body seemed to be churning endlessly, and in the next moment, she would spit it out. Shi Ning's performance was seen by Yang Chendong, but he did not have the slightest intention of stopping. Instead, he raised his voice by a few decibels and continued to shout, "You are a thief. Heaven and earth are witnesses. You are the leader of the thieves." After shouting, Yang Chendong suddenly pointed at Shi Ning with his right hand and said, "If the heavens have eyes, this child should die immediately. He can no longer cause trouble in the world." Pooh! A bullet flew out, following Yang Chendong's finger, and landed right where Shi Ning's heart was. Shi Ning, who was originally angry, only felt a pain in his chest, and then he lost all feeling. With a plop, he fell from the horse to the ground. Everything happened too fast. When the sniper rifle with a silencer was fired, coupled with Yang Chendong's shout, it did not attract the slightest bit of attention from others. What everyone saw was the scene of Shi Ning falling from the horse and hitting the ground after Yang Chendong asked the heavens. Shi Ning was dead. His body was lying on the ground. It gave people the feeling that even if he died, he could not wash away the sins he had committed. Therefore, he could not face others. Jia. The two Walla cavalry soldiers who were originally standing beside Shi Ning saw that the person they were protecting was actually cursed to death. They were shocked and immediately turned their horses back. "You are aiding the evildoer. How can the heavens forgive you so easily? Let's die together." Seeing that the fat sheep in his hands was about to escape, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a sneer. Then, he pointed at the two Walla cavalry soldiers who were rushing back. Immediately, the two figures fell from the horse and rolled on the ground twice. After that, there was no sign of life. With 3 finger strikes, 3 people died in succession. This shocking scene shocked everyone. At this time, whether it was the great Ming soldiers on the city tower or the Walla cavalry soldiers below the city, they all looked up at the sky. They seemed to be looking for the place where the gods were. The gods have shown themselves. After the Walla cavalry, 3 steps away from the city wall, couldn't find the reason, there was a commotion. Many of the cavalry had already reached out and tightened the ropes of their horses. It seemed that they would retreat at any time. Don't panic, don't panic. The leader of the cavalry was also surprised, but as the vanguard general, he couldn't retreat like this. Otherwise, not only would he be punished by the military law, he was afraid that he would be ridiculed by the other generals when he returned. Under the loud roar, the Walla cavalry gradually calmed down. In order to stabilize the morale of the troops, the leader stretched out his waist and pulled out the scimitar. It seemed that he was ready to attack. What? Don't you know how to retreat? If that's the case, then stay here. Yang Qindong, who was standing on the city tower, narrowed his eyes. He couldn't let the Walla cavalry charge. Otherwise, it was inevitable that there would be casualties in the chaos. He had to fight this battle beautifully. He couldn't afford any losses. Therefore, when he saw that the leader was about to pull out his scimitar, Yang Qindong pointed his right hand in the air. The leader, who had just raised his scimitar, twisted his body on the horse and fell to his death. Not good. The general fell off his horse. The leader was already shot in the forehead and couldn't be saved. A few of his soldiers wanted to get down from their horses to see what happened. On the city tower, Yang Qindong pointed his finger again. The 5 Walla cavalrymen who had just dismounted fell to the ground one by one and died. It's really a god. Run. Under the continuous deaths, the Walla cavalry was agitated by the scene in front of them. They were surrounded by a deep sense of fear. It was as if they were afraid that they would be the next one to be pointed at. The cavalrymen in the front row all turned their horses around. The Walla cavalry suddenly became chaotic. With the death of the leader, there was no commanding general and no unified military order. The consequences of this chaos were very serious. Yang Qindong, who was on the victory pavilion, had already predicted this moment. Seeing that the opportunity was here, he decisively said to Sun Tong, "Quick, order General Yang Guang to go out of the city and kill the enemy." Sun Tong was also stunned by Yang Qindong's continuous pointing. At this moment, he also had a feeling that it was a god. He was so shocked that he would do whatever Yang Qindong said. He immediately agreed and went to pass on the order. Yang Guang, who was under the victory pavilion, saw the situation outside clearly through the hole in the city wall. He was so shocked that he forgot to chase after the enemy. It wasn't until Sun Tong ran to his side and loudly said that the loyal marquis had ordered to go out of the city and kill the enemy that he recovered. "All cavalrymen, listen to my order. Go out of the city and kill the enemy. Go out of the city and kill the enemy." Many of the soldiers saw Yang Qindong's godlike appearance, and their morale was greatly shaken. One by one, they waved their scimitars and rushed out of the city gate. Chapter 199. The formation of the Walla cavalry was still in disarray. When they saw countless great Ming cavalry rushing out of the city gates, they became even more flustered. Every single one of them turned on their horses and fled. However, their formation was already in a complete mess. How could they just run away like that? Before the great Ming cavalry could even reach them, they had already trampled over many of their own people. By the time the great Ming cavalry arrived, they were like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. They only cared about covering their heads and fleeing like rats. No one dared to fight against the great Ming cavalry. This was a one-sided battle. With the death of their general and the loss of their morale, the Walla cavalry was completely routed. In this kind of situation, how could they possibly be a match for the great Ming cavalry whose morale was at its peak? For a time, the situation on the battlefield was completely one-sided. Standing on top of the city gates of the Victory Gate, one could see the Walla cavalry being slaughtered. There were even some Walla cavalry soldiers kneeling on the ground and begging to surrender. The facts proved that there was no army that was undefeatable. As long as one used the right method, they could be defeated and surrendered. Yang Guang waved his large blade and led the charge. Just the number of Walla cavalry soldiers killed by him exceeded 7. Under his leadership, the majority of the great Ming cavalry also managed to kill a few. In the end, they were already 15 li away from the city gates. At this moment, Yang Guang suddenly remembered the words of the loyal Marquis. He immediately stopped his horse and gave up on the pursuit. Instead, he turned around and began to clean up the battlefield. Hee. With the situation settled, Yang Chendong revealed a hearty smile. He was in a good mood as he waved at Hu Yin and the others. Come, let's go back to the immortal abode to eat. Let's go, let's go. Hu Yin and the others didn't show the slightest bit of fear. After seeing the brave side of their husband, the fear in their hearts had long flown beyond the highest heavens. Marquis Yang, the war isn't over yet. Sun Tong saw that Yang Chendong was about to leave and hurriedly stood in front of him with a pleading expression. Isn't today's war already over? Oh, that's right. You can also bring your subordinates to capture captives now. That's a great contribution. After we clean up the battlefield, we can report to the Emperor. As for Marquis, he is a little tired and should go back and rest. When the main force of the Walla arrives, Marquis will appear. After saying this to Sun Tong, Yang Chendong and the 4 madams went back to the Victory Gate. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Chiu V's first guard team protected him as they gradually disappeared from Sun Tong's sight. Seeing Yang Chendong leave in such a carefree manner, Sun Tong felt a little regretful. He regretted that he did not seize the opportunity to associate with the loyal Marquis, and regretted that he sent the information that the city gates were wide open to the Emperor. Since the deed had already been done, he could only think of a way to make up for it in the future. As for now, of course, he had to lead the troops to capture the captives. Just as Yang Chendong had said, this was a great contribution. Normally, they wouldn't even encounter it. So how could they let it go now that they had encountered it? Sun Tong rushed down the tower with more than 4,000 people and rushed to the front of the Walla cavalry who were kneeling on the ground. The officers and soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office, who originally only bullied the civilians, were now standing upright, as if they had changed into another person. After an hour, the battlefield was cleaned up, and the battle report was also summarized. In one battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed and more than 5,000 were captured. Yang Chendong's debut finally ended with a great victory. Because Sun Tong was focused on snatching military merits, the throne room did not receive the news immediately. Zhu Qiyu and the ministers were together, waiting for the battle report with a nervous expression. From time to time, the ministers would prick up their ears to listen to the movements outside. However, everything was as usual, and they did not hear any sounds of fighting coming from the city. Since there was no movement, it was good news. The emperor and the officials waited patiently until a eunuch came to report that Deputy Chief Commander Yang Guang and Commander Sun Tong were waiting outside the hall. Zhu Qiyu hurriedly said, "Quickly invite them in." He even used the word invite. It could be seen that at this moment, Zhu Qiyu was very concerned about the development of the battle, so much so that he did not even care about losing decorum. Yang Guang and Sun Tong, who were wearing heavy armor, strode into the throne room. When they were 20 steps away from the emperor, they took the initiative to stop. Then, they half knelt on the ground and said in unison, "Great victory! We have come to offer the captives." Although it was only 2 people's voices, under full confidence, their voices were extremely loud and clear. This voice was like a giant hammer that struck the hearts of the emperor and the ministers. Hua! The emperor and the ministers, who were originally motionless and staring at the 2 people, couldn't help but tense up and then relax. After hearing the 2 people's reports, they were silent for a few seconds, as if they were all digesting this great victory report. How many captives were captured? What was the result of the battle? The Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, was worthy of being an old minister. His reaction was extremely fast. While the others were still in shock, he had already asked the key question. In this battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed, more than 5,000 captives were captured, including Walla's vanguard general, Sai Bianwang, Vanguard Guanxining, and others. 10,000 enemies came, but only 2,000 managed to escape. Yang Guang's voice was still loud. More than 5,000 enemy captives are now outside the imperial palace. Emperor and the ministers, please go and take a look. Sun Tong was not willing to give up and reported the merit. This was also what the two of them had discussed on the way here. Since the battle was fought together, of course, the merit could not be claimed by one person. In any case, the merit was big enough, so it was not a big deal to have one more person share the burden. In this battle, our army did not have any casualties. We killed the enemy like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. This is all because the emperor is protected by the heavens. This official congratulates the emperor. When Sun Tong's words of congratulation came out, the ministers reacted at this time. They collectively kneeled on the ground and shouted loudly and excitedly. In the past, such words were said by the civil officials. The military officials only needed to focus on the battle. Usually, wasn't the reason why they were raised to be used at critical times? As for the merit or not, forget it. Even if they were military officials, it was their responsibility to win the battle. Did you not see Duke Ing Zhongfu's example? When there was a battle, there was limitless glory. When there was no battle, there was all kinds of suspicion and jealousy from the emperor. Even a random eunuch might dare to bully you. In the end, you ended up without a corpse. Sun Tong rushed to say this sentence, not because of a whim, but because he had thought about it along the way. Why was it that when he risked his life and had the merit, only those civil officials who were good at talking would get it? He was not convinced, so he took the initiative. Sure enough, taking the initiative to say congratulations to the emperor, Sun Tong attracted a lot of good feelings from Zhu Qiyu. Good, very good. General Yang and General Sun have worked hard. After defeating the Walla army, you will be rewarded according to your merits. Ha ha ha. Now, everyone, follow me to see the prisoners. Zhu Qiyu, who was originally nervous and clenched his hands until they turned white, could finally put down his high-hanging heart at this moment. At this moment, he was also in a good mood. Laughing loudly, he led the ministers straight to the square outside the imperial palace. On the square, there was a black mass of Walla cavalry in strange clothes kneeling on the ground. They all had their heads lowered, their faces dispirited. Some of them were even trembling slightly to show that their hearts were not calm at this moment, and were even a little scared. It was no wonder that they were so nervous. Previously, when Yang Chendong stretched out his finger at the victory gate, one by one, the Walla cavalry fell to the ground and died. Even their general, the king, died because of this. That scene shocked them so much that they still felt scared when they thought about it. The Walla, who had no culture, were very superstitious. They agreed very much with the saying that the gods had appeared. Since even the gods wanted to help the great Ming Empire, how could they fight this war? Surrendering and atoning for their sins might be able to exchange for the forgiveness of the gods. More than 5,000 Walla cavalrymen knelt on the ground obediently. Although their hands were tied, with their current mentality, even if they weren't tied up, not many of them would have the guts to resist. When Zhu Qiyu came here with the ministers, he saw this scene in front of him. Looking at the kneeling Walla cavalry, he couldn't see the end of it. The square, which originally looked very wide, was now very crowded. The great Ming Empire's soldiers and the Walla's surrendered soldiers were all over the ground. At this moment, no one doubted Yang Guang and Sun Tong's battle report. They thought that the war should be won, but the result would not be so good. The two generals were exaggerating in order to get military merits. But now it seemed that they were not exaggerating at all. Involuntarily, when the ministers looked at Yang Guang and Sun Tong, their eyes were full of jealousy. People were like this. When in danger, they often thought that it was enough to save their lives, and other worldly possessions could be ignored. But when it was really safe, the thoughts in their hearts would become more and more greedy. This was just a victory, and the Walla's main force had not suffered much damage, but some ministers were thinking about how to get benefits from it. It could be seen that a man who was not content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. It was not as simple as saying, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. This is caused by Your Majesty's heavenly power." This is enough to prove that your majesty is the true son of heaven. Eunuch Jining looked at the seemingly countless captive soldiers in front of him. After his eyes rolled around, he suddenly knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, "Congratulations, your majesty! Your majesty is the true son of heaven." Many ministers who were used to flattering also took the opportunity to kneel on the ground and shouted loudly for the emperor's wisdom. The shouts of the ministers made Zhu Qiyu feel like he was floating. At this moment, he really thought that he was the emperor recognized by the heavens, and he was the son of the heavens. Otherwise, why was his imperial brother Zhu Qizhen defeated by Wala, and why was Shi Heng also defeated by Wala, but only he won? Chapter 200. Ha ha, ha ha ha. All of this is due to the assistance of all the officials. Zhu Qiyu happily distributed the credit to the other officials. For a moment, it attracted endless sounds of gratitude from the officials. However, not all of the officials were shouting that the emperor was the true son of heaven. For example, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, had always maintained a clear mind. As an old official of several dynasties, he was very clear that the emperor was only the head of the dragons. Otherwise, the court would not be able to be unified and clear. As for who would be the head, it all depended on luck and identity. Just like when Zhu Qizhen was the emperor, didn't these officials also shout that the emperor was wise and that the emperor was the true son of heaven? But in reality, after losing the battle, everyone instantly shut their mouths. Now, they began to praise Zhu Qiyu again. It was really unknown how thick the skin of these people was. However, in the court, there were some things that had to be done. If you were too independent, you would only be isolated by the other officials. In that case, it would really be difficult to do anything. However, even if they wanted to flatter, shouldn't they do it more gently? Zhu Qiyu had been nervously waiting in the imperial palace. What did the victory of this battle have to do with him? He was somewhat displeased. Or perhaps it was because of the unfairness of his grandson-in-law. When everyone was shouting that the emperor was wise and long live the emperor, Hu Shao suddenly said, "Generals, where is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage? Why is he not here? Did he leave the city to chase the enemy, or was he injured in the battle?" Finally, someone mentioned Yang Chendong. The originally noisy scene instantly quieted down. Hu Zhao's words were like a bright slap to the face, causing many of the officials' faces to turn red. The true hero of this battle should be Yang Chendong, without a doubt. However, so much time had passed, yet no one thought of him. This was truly a bit too much. When these words came out, Zhu Qiyu's face also turned red. He clearly knew that his performance just now was a bit too much. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong, it would have been difficult to achieve such a great victory. After he knew of the great victory, he didn't think of the person with the greatest merit, and instead received the congratulations of the officials. This was truly a bit too much. Fortunately, Hu Shao gave a timely reminder. He also asked, "That's right. Why is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage not here? Why don't we see him?" Zhu Qiyu pretended to be anxious for the officials to see. This immediately attracted many of the officials' nods. They all seemed to be praising the emperor's actions towards the meritorious officials, but in reality, only they knew what was going on. Yang Guang and Sun Chendong, the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage. After all, without this person, there wouldn't be today's victory, and they wouldn't have had the chance to be in the limelight. However, it seemed to be a little late for the emperor to ask about it now. No matter how, the emperor of loyalty, Zhu Guang. Now that he was asked, the two immediately knelt on the ground and replied, "Your Majesty, the loyal Marquis wasn't injured. He only said he was tired and went back to rest." Tired? Resting? Zhu Qiyu was confused by this answer. He stood there with a face full of suspicion. Yes, he is indeed tired. The truth is like this. Sun Chendong narrated what happened on the battlefield. From Yang Chendong scolding Shi Ning for being unfaithful, unfilial, heartless, and unjust, he pointed out and Shi Ning died. After that, he pointed out that Shi Ning fell off his horse and died, causing the Wala army to lose morale. Everyone listened to Sun Chendong's narration as if they were listening to a heavenly book. For a moment, everyone's faces tightened. They didn't expect the young Marquis to have such ability. While everyone was still digesting Sun Shindong's words, Minister of War Ming spoke first. Commander Sun, do you know what you just said? The person standing in front of you is the Emperor, the Son of Heaven. How can you speak without thinking? This subject is not speaking nonsense. What I said is the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask Commander Yang and all the soldiers who participated in the battle. Sun Shindong heard Ming accuse him of lying and immediately defended himself. A small commander, who was only a 6th-grade official, dared to contradict a 2nd-grade minister of war. This naturally made Ming's face turn ugly. He secretly made a note of this person and thought that if he had the chance, he would definitely teach him a lesson. His gaze fell on Yang Guang. Vice Commander Yang, tell me, what is the truth? Of course, you don't have to be afraid of other people's threats. Just tell the truth. With this minister here, no one will dare to make things difficult for you. Ming said this not to support Yang Shindong, but to guide him to refute Sun Shindong and deny the fact that the greatest contributor in this battle was Yang Shindong. If a minister of war were to question a vice commander, the latter would be scared to the point of wetting his pants. However, Yang Guang, who had just experienced a battle, was full of admiration for Yang Shindong. How could he dare to speak ill of him? He immediately kowtowed to the ground. This general does not dare to speak nonsense. What Commander Sun said is the truth.
Wow.
As soon as Yang Guang's words fell, the crowd once again exclaimed in surprise. Since the two generals had said the same thing, it seemed that this matter was true. However, how could Yang Shindong kill anyone he pointed at? Could it be that he had some kind of sorcery? Ming stood there with an ugly expression. The two of them were his subordinates in name, but now they dared to refute him in public. It was truly embarrassing. Fortunately, no one's attention was on him, so he didn't lose too much face. After hearing Sun Shindong and Yang Guang's explanation, the officials finally understood why the loyal Marquis was tired and needed a good rest. It was probably because the sorcery he used was too tiring. Of course, some people who knew immediately thought of the mercenaries who had the most advanced firearms. These people only knew that the mercenaries' firearms were very advanced. As for how advanced they were, they didn't know. After hearing what happened on the battlefield today, they had a new view of the matter. Zhu Qiyu was naturally one of the people who knew. But the more it was like this, the more worried he was. This advanced firearm could easily take a person's life from 1,000 meters away. If that was the case, didn't it mean that if one day they wanted to deal with him, he would also have nowhere to hide? As soon as this thought appeared, it was like a large stone pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. He even felt a little restless. As the emperor, the thing he was most worried about was that he couldn't control the situation. Then he wouldn't be able to decide the life and death of others. At this moment, the joy of winning the battle was no longer as strong. Instead, it was replaced with a worried expression. Zhu Qiyu left first, accompanied by head eunuch Jin Ying. Without the emperor, the officials also lost the mood to celebrate. One by one, they turned and returned to their own residences. With today's victory, they could finally go back and have a good night's sleep. In the imperial palace, Zhu Qiyu walked in front with a heavy heart. Behind him, Jining followed step by step. It wasn't until they entered the rear courtyard of the imperial palace, and there was no one around that he quickened his pace. He was half a step behind the emperor when he said, "Your Majesty, are you worried about the Marquis of Loyalty?" Yes. Without anyone else around, Zhu Qiyu finally admitted, "The mercenaries' firearms are too advanced. The Marquis of Loyalty has such a good relationship with them. If they..." Zhu Qiyu didn't finish his sentence, but he believed that Jin Ying would understand. In a sense, they were grasshoppers on the same rope. Only when his throne was secure could Jin Ying bask in his glory and hold power. How could Jin Ying not understand this logic? With Zhu Qiyu around, he was the eunuch Jin that everyone admired. Without this emperor, he would probably die without a burial ground. Since the emperor had worries and hidden dangers, he had to think of a way to deal with them. This subject understands. How about this? I will immediately make a trip to the immortal abode and have a chat with the Marquis of Loyalty. At the same time, I will see if there is an opportunity to get in touch with the general of the mercenaries and reach some kind of agreement with them. Jin Ying reported his thoughts to the emperor. Good. Let's work on both sides. In any case, there must be a result. We will not allow anyone who threatens our safety to exist. Zhu Qiyu nodded lightly, his voice carrying a hint of dignity. Immortal Abode. When Yang Chendong returned, he had gained a new title, War God. This was probably what it meant to become a god in a single battle. With just a few pointers, he had created his own legend. According to reliable investigations, not a single member of the great Ming dynasty's army had died in this battle. Only a dozen or so people had been injured in the pursuit because they had been too excited. The achievement of repelling 10,000 enemies with 0 casualties was worthy of this title. This was the benefit of having a weapon that transcended time. It wasn't that the Walla was useless, but rather that the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad's marksmanship was too miraculous. In the Immortal Abode study, Yang Chenong was listening to the report of the Deputy Chief of the Security Bureau, Yang San, with his eyes closed. Summarizing a battle after a battle was an excellent tradition. Even Yang Chendong was no exception. Before this battle, he had already made plans for the worst-case scenario. That was, the Walla cavalry wouldn't stop and would directly attack. If that were the case, the 4 companies of Cold Vanguard lying in ambush outside the Victory Gate would all attack. If that were the case, no one could guarantee that the Cold Vanguard wouldn't suffer any losses in the chaotic battle. After all, their greatest shortcoming was their lack of numbers. If they really did encounter enemies who didn't fear death, how many people could they kill with 400 guns? Fortunately, the Victory Gate had been opened wide, allowing Wang Zhan to fantasize about such a smooth battle. You can't rely on luck in war. This must be conveyed to Commander Long Song, as well as to the ears of every Cold Vanguard soldier. Yang Chenong heard from Yang Bin that some of the Cold Vanguard soldiers had different opinions about only lying in ambush and not fighting head-on. After saying that the young master was being too careful, his expression became extremely serious. Chapter 201. Yang Chendong didn't blame them for having such thoughts and complaints. After all, they wielded the most advanced weapons in the world and had undergone the strictest training. However, they couldn't afford to be arrogant. Otherwise, they would suffer a setback sooner or later. Since Long Feng had the intention to underestimate the enemy, they had to correct the situation. Seeing how serious Yang Chendong was, Yang San hurriedly took out a notebook and wrote everything down. He couldn't help but nod his head. This subordinate will immediately go to the courtyard to let everyone know about this and let them know that young master cares about them. At the same time, inform them that the Walla's vanguard has been defeated, but Yes Hin won't let it go so easily. There will be at least one more battle. Tell them to be prepared. Yang Chendong nodded his head in satisfaction. Then, he thought of the matter in the imperial court and asked, right after this battle, what are the thoughts of His Majesty and the officials? Has there been any controversy in the imperial court? Young master, this subordinate was just about to report this matter. I just received news from Lord Su Yozhen that not long after you gave the order to open the city gates, the imperial court learned of this matter. After our investigation, we found that it was probably Commander Sun Tong who sent someone to report this news. Because of this, there are people who are slandering the young master, saying that you are colluding with the Walla. The new Minister of War, Yiming, is the main culprit. The Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, have spoken up in support of this matter. It was only after Minister Hu Meng stepped in that these rumors were suppressed. Do you think we should do something in private? The situation in the capital isn't stable at the moment, so it's normal for a few people to be missing. Yang San reported while carefully looking at Yang Chenong. He had already made his intentions clear. Since there were people who wanted to deal with the young master, it would be better to strike first and get rid of him. No. Yang Chendong quickly shook his head upon hearing Yang San's thoughts. The great Ming dynasty's problems don't completely originate from the imperial court. These people are just representatives of Confucianism. Even if all the ministers in the court are arrested, there will still be people who will be re-elected. This is simply a problem with the system. There is no end to killing people. Yang Chendong was very clear in his heart. Looking at the history of China, ever since the Han dynasty revered only Confucianism, the disciples of the Confucian sect were the privileged class, high and mighty. Over the years, they had become accustomed to it. They monopolized education and the officialdom. They were corrupt, conservative, and stubborn. However, they were so powerful that even the emperor had to give face to them. Often, they would support things that were beneficial to them and oppose things that were not. Yang Qindong's appearance was a threat to them. It was just that the fight had not reached the root of the problem yet, so it had not escalated to the extreme. This was also one of the important reasons why Yang Qindong only developed in the business world. Yang Bao's distribution, Immortal Abode, and Sky Beyond Heaven's hot sales, plus the Yang family's bank that was going to be established soon, gave people the feeling that they were thinking of ways to earn money. In the eyes of the Confucians, they were just stained with the stench of money and could not be brought to the table. In truth, all of this was Yang Qindong's intention. He did not come into contact with other industries in order to avoid direct confrontation with the Confucian faction. What he needed to do was slowly infiltrate. Once he had enough influence, some things would naturally come naturally. But before that, not even the emperor could touch this faction, and those who angered him would not have a good end. Why would he want to provoke them? Ming and the others had only tried to undermine him because they did not want to see him gain too much power and merit. In the end, it was still jealousy at work. This sort of mentality was of no consequence to the overall situation, so there was no need to care too much about it. On the contrary, if he killed them now, anyone who wasn't a fool would be able to see that he was the culprit. That would be tantamount to declaring war on the Confucian sect. He wouldn't do such a thankless thing. Yang Qindong had vetoed the decision to attack Ming and the others, so Yang San knew that the time was not right. He immediately expressed that he would only pay attention to these people in the future, but would not take any action. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Yang San's timely declaration. Very good. The staff of the Security Bureau have worked hard. How about this, when you go out, go to the chief of Tiger's Mane and get 1,000,000 taels of silver to reward your brothers. Young master, there is still enough silver. Yang San waved his hand, wanting to refuse. In fact, the Security Bureau had never lacked silver. All of this was because Yang Qindong had said that if they wanted to establish an excellent intelligence system, they had to be willing to spend silver. Thus, a steady stream of silver flowed into the Security Bureau. With enough silver, it was much easier to do things with half the effort. Just this treatment alone had attracted the envy and jealousy of many people in the Yang family. However, this matter was requested by Yang Qindong, so even if others had some thoughts, they did not dare to say anything publicly. The Security Bureau was not in the eyes of some of the senior officers of the Yang Consortium's new army, but Yang Qindong's weight and authority were not to be questioned. All right, it's settled then. Go and do your work. Without giving Yang Bin a chance to refuse, Yang Qindong waved his hand and gestured for him to leave. Yang San was touched. He knew that the young master felt sorry for his brothers in the Security Bureau. After all, the members of the Security Bureau were sometimes like mice that could not see the sun. Most of them lived in the dark. In order to keep their identities secret, they could not contact their families, get married, and have children. They had to give up all their youth. Sometimes, in order to obtain important information, they had to work hard for a few months, half a year, or even longer. Giving more silver was one of Yang Qindong's ways of compensating them. Yang San suddenly raised his right hand and gave a standard military salute before leaving the study. Not long after, Tiger's Mane strode in. There were not many people who could come to Yang Qindong's side without reporting. Other than Hu Yin and the other girls, only Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei had such qualifications. Young Master, Eunuch Jin Ing is here. He said he brought a new edict from His Majesty. As soon as Tiger's Mane entered the room and saw Yang Qindong leaning against the chair with his eyes closed, he said carefully. Yang Qindong, whose eyes were still closed, acted as if he did not hear Tiger's Mane's words. He asked, "Has the 1,000,000 taels of silver been sent to the Security Bureau?" "Yes, it's been sent. It's the remuneration that His Majesty gave to Long Feng." "That's good. Arrange a side hall. I'll go see Jin Ing." Yang Qindong slowly opened his eyes. After he got up and stretched, his eyes shone with a dazzling luster again. At this moment, Jin Ing had come to see him. Even if he used his toes to think, he would know why. It seemed that Zhu Qiyu was not confident. Zhu Qiyu was indeed not confident. On one hand, He wanted to use the mercenaries to defeat Walla's great enemy. On the other hand, he was worried that the mercenaries would threaten his safety after their victory, to guard against people and to use people at the same time. Under such contradictory psychology, Jining had come. In the side hall, Yang Chendong and Jining met. After greeting each other, they sat down in their respective seats. Eunuch Jan first praised the loyal Marquis's performance today and even called him a military god. Both the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards had their own intelligence agencies. Because they had been established for a long time, their strength could not be underestimated. For example, the fact that Yang Chendong was called a military god could not be hidden from Jin Ying's eyes and ears. Haha, Eunuch Jin must be joking. It's all thanks to His Majesty's good fortune, Yang Chendong said modestly with a smile. This battle was won by relying on the advanced firearms of the mercenaries. His Majesty is just someone who spent money. Jining chuckled, but as he spoke, he pointed out the crux of the problem. This eunuch was clear about everything. You're just a military god who used advanced firearms. It can't be taken seriously. Moreover, even if the mercenaries were hired, the emperor would be the one paying for it. Your contribution would be even less. Yes, Eunuch Jin's words are very true. Yang Chendong's expression did not change. He did not even have the intention to deny it. For this matter, Zhu Qiyu had spent 10 million taels of silver. Although half of it had been in the form of property, it was still wealth. The fact that Yang Chendong had so easily admitted it made Jining feel like he had punched cotton, and his complexion turned rather nasty. When he had come, he had already prepared himself for Yang Chendong to ask for a reward. He had even prepared the words of reprimand so that he could use this opportunity to suppress this marquis of loyalty and valor. But Wang Chendong had no intention of asking for a reward, so what could he do? He couldn't just go and reprimand a meritorious subject without a word. If he did that, he would be going too far. After all, the main force of the Walla had yet to arrive at the capital. If he got rid of the donkey after it had left the millstone and he couldn't deal with the mercenaries, wouldn't the capital be in danger? He could not bear such a heavy responsibility. Yang Chendong's low profile and modesty had ruined Jin Ying's plans. But Jin Ying had followed several emperors, so he was able to react quickly. He looked at Yang Chendong and said, Marquis of loyalty and valor, His Majesty is extremely satisfied with the performance of the mercenaries in this battle. He ordered this duke to reward the mercenaries no matter what. The imperial kitchen has prepared a lot of food for this occasion. Marquis Yang, why don't you tell them so that they can make things easier for you? At the very least, His Majesty should act as a host. Listening to Jin Ying's words, Wang Chendong knew that Jin Ying still wanted to go around him and get in touch with the mercenaries. Since this was the case and they had prepared delicious food, how could he not take advantage of this opportunity? If he could save on the immortal abode's food, why not? He smiled and said, All right, since it's His Majesty's wish, this marquis will send someone to accompany Jin Gonggong to the mercenary camp's courtyard. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.